The night does not fall here. It rises from the frozen earth, seeping upward like ink spilling across a page of heavy, textured paper. It is a darkness that feels grainy to the touch, a deep, resonant charcoal gray that swallows the horizon and blends the sky with the land until there is no distinction between the two. The world has been reduced to shades of slate, indigo, and the deepest black, a sketch rendered in soft lead and smudged by a heavy thumb. Here, in the valley of the long winter, the air itself possesses a texture, a thickness that resists movement, hanging suspended in the breathless void between the mountains. It is a landscape drawn in silence, where the only movement is the slow, deliberate drift of frost settling upon the hardened ground, layer upon microscopic layer, building a monument to the cold. The encampment sits in the center of this vast, monochromatic expanse, a collection of geometric shapes huddled together against the crushing weight of the atmosphere. The tents are triangular peaks of pale canvas, glowing faintly in the moonlight like pyramids of ice, their surfaces rendered in strokes of white and silver pencil against the dark construction paper of the night. There is no sound of marching, no clatter of steel, no voices raised in command or camaraderie. There is only the wind. The wind is the artist of this desolate gallery, a constant, unseen hand that reshapes the drifts of snow and pulls at the edges of the canvas shelters. It moves with a low, mournful tone, a vibration that is felt in the bones rather than heard by the ears, a ceaseless humming that suggests the earth itself is shivering. In the center of the camp stands the commander's tent. It is larger than the others, a heavier shape in the dark composition, anchored by ropes that hum tight in the biting air. The canvas is thick, a rough-woven fabric that has stiffened with the frost, transforming from cloth into a solid shell. It holds the shape of the wind even when the wind momentarily dies, a frozen sculpture of resistance. The ropes are coated in rime ice, jagged crystals that catch the faint starlight and glitter like crushed diamonds, lines of white pastel drawn sharply against the shadows. The wooden stakes are driven deep into the permafrost, immovable, gripping the iron-hard soil with a tenacity that speaks of permanence, as if this tent has always been here and will always remain, a fixed point in a drifting universe. Inside, the world contracts. The vastness of the valley is replaced by the intimate, enclosed sphere of the command. The air here is still cold, but it is a stillness that smells of old wool, damp leather, and the faint, acrid scent of burning tallow. The darkness is not absolute. It is pushed back, gently and persistently, by the single point of light that anchors the room. A candle, thick and yellow, stands upon the center of the heavy field desk. It is the sun of this small solar system, a solitary flame that flickers with a slow, hypnotic rhythm. The light it casts is warm, a soft amber pastel rubbed into the center of the deep blue drawing, fading gradually into the shadows that cling to the corners of the tent. The flame does not roar, it breathes. It stretches upward, a slender tier of fire, then bows low as a draft finds its way through the unseen seams of the canvas entry. The shadows on the walls mimic this dance, stretching and contracting, tall, distorted figures that loom over the commander like silent sentinels. The light catches the texture of the tent walls, revealing the weave of the fabric, the microscopic valleys and peaks of the canvas, each thread a landscape of its own. In this dim illumination, the world is reduced to textures. The rough grain of the wooden tent pole, the smooth, cold sheen of the brass telescope case, the heavy, matted fur of the rug beneath the table. Every surface absorbs the silence, holding it, heavy and thick. The commander sits at the desk. He is a part of the stillness, a figure drawn in heavy lines and deep shading. He does not move. His coat is a fortress of heavy wool, dyed a blue so dark it appears black in the candlelight, the fabric thick and stiff. The collar is lined with fur, frosted with the moisture of his own breath, framing a face that is etched with the patience of stone. He is not a man of action in this moment. He is a man of endurance. His gloved hands rest upon the surface of the map, heavy leather fingers splayed out over the topography of a world that is currently buried under snow. He does not look at the map to read it. He looks at it to anchor himself in time and space, to remind himself that there is a land beneath the ice. The desk is a chaotic landscape of strategy, rendered in sepia and gray. Scrolls of parchment, curled at the edges from the dryness of the cold, are held down by heavy brass weights. An inkwell, the glass thick and clouded, sits near the candle to keep the black fluid from turning to ice. A quill pen, the feather ragged and gray, rests beside it, waiting for a command that does not come. The commander simply breathes. His breath is visible, a rhythmic cloud of white vapor that rises from his lips, swirls briefly in the golden light of the candle, and then vanishes into the upper darkness of the tent's peak. It is the only clock in the room, this steady, slow release of warmth into the cold. In and out, in and out. A slow, hydraulic cycle that marks the passage of seconds in a night that feels as though it spans centuries. Outside, the wind shifts. It changes direction, coming now from the north, carrying with it a fresh wave of temperature that drops the world even deeper into the freeze. The canvas of the tent reacts, snapping once, a sharp, cracking sound like a breaking branch, before settling back into a low, resonant fluttering. The sound is muffled, distant, as if coming from another world. The commander does not flinch. His eyes are fixed on the flame of the candle. He watches the wax melt, a slow, viscous slide of liquid gold pooling at the base of the wick, threatening to overflow the rim. He watches the blackened curl of the wick itself, glowing red at the tip, consuming the fuel in a silent act of survival. The cold presses against the canvas. It is a physical presence, a heavy hand pushing against the fabric walls, seeking entry. It finds the gaps near the ground, the places where the sod cloth has not been piled high enough with snow. It seeps in, a creeping fog of sub-zero air that crawls across the floorboards. The commander can feel it around his boots, a ring of numbness that tightens slowly. He adjusts his feet, a microscopic shift of weight, the leather of his boots creaking softly. The sound is loud in the silence, a groan of frozen material protesting the movement. On the desk, the map is a masterpiece of cartography, drawn with precision and care. Rivers are inked in delicate, winding lines, forests are clusters of hatched marks, mountains are raised ridges of shading. But in the dim light, the map looks less like a representation of terrain and more like a representation of the silence itself. The white spaces of the paper dominate, vast areas where nothing is written, echoing the white emptiness of the snow outside. The commander traces a line with his eyes, a road, a supply line, a path that is currently invisible, lost under feet of drift. He knows the coordinates, he knows the distances, but in this tent, by this candlelight, distance is abstract. The only reality is the immediate circle of warmth generated by the flame and the heavy wool of his coat. The light flickers again, casting the shadow of the inkwell across the map. The shadow is long and distorted, stretching out like a dark stain spreading across the paper lands. The commander watches the shadow lengthen and shorten with the pulse of the flame. It is a hypnotic motion, a pendulum swinging in slow motion. The smell of the wax is stronger now, a heavy, fatty scent that mixes with the smell of old paper. It is the scent of waiting. The entire camp is waiting. The horses in their pickets, heads hung low, breath steaming. The sentries walking their perimeter, boots crunching on the packed snow. The soldiers huddled in their tents, wrapped in blankets, dreaming of hearths and sun. And the commander sitting alone, the pivot point upon which the army turns, waiting for the dawn that feels impossibly far away. He reaches out, his hand moving with the sluggish deliberation of a limb moving through water, and touches the brass casing of the telescope. The metal is biting cold, a shock of temperature that seeps through the leather of his glove. It is a reminder of the world beyond the canvas. The metal has absorbed the night. It holds the freezing temperature of the stars. He withdraws his hand, bringing it back to the warmth of his chest, crossing his arms over the thick wool. The friction of the movement creates a soft, rustling sound, like dry leaves skittering over stone. The atmosphere in the tent is heavy, layered with the weight of the heavy air. The carbon dioxide of his breath, the smoke from the candle, the dampness rising from the ground, it all collects in the cone of the tent, a palpable density. To breathe is to work. The air must be pulled into the lungs, warmed, and pushed back out. It is a labor of existence. The commander closes his eyes for a moment. Behind his eyelids, the afterimage of the candle flame burns, a bright orange spot floating in a sea of velvet black. He listens. He listens to the wind rasping against the outer shell of his sanctuary. He listens to the wood of the tent pole groaning under the tension of the ropes. He listens to the silence between the sounds, the vast, expansive quiet of a winter that has conquered the land. When he opens his eyes, the scene remains unchanged. The sketch is static. The vintage tones of deep Prussian blue and burnt umber remain fixed. The light falls on the same patch of the map. The wax has dripped slightly further down the side of the candle, a frozen tear of tallow that hardens almost instantly in the cool air of the room. Time is moving, but it is moving at the pace of geology, at the pace of glaciers grinding down mountains. The strategy by candlelight is not a strategy of movement, but of stasis. It is the strategy of holding on. The commander leans forward slightly, the wooden chair creaking beneath him. He picks up the quill. The feather is brittle to the touch. He dips the nib into the inkwell. The ink is thick, sluggish, clinging to the metal tip like syrup. He hovers the pen over a piece of blank parchment. The paper has a tooth to it, a rough texture that catches the light. He does not write. He holds the pen suspended, a frozen gesture. What is there to write? The report is always the same. The cold, the weight, the wind. The supplies are stable. The men are cold. The enemy is the winter. He watches the ink darken on the nib, beginning to dry before it ever touches the page. He lowers the pen, setting it back down beside the well. A single drop of black ink falls onto the wood of the desk, a perfect dark circle that glistens wetly. He stares at the drop of ink. In the candlelight, it acts as a black mirror, reflecting a tiny, inverted image of the flame, a fire trapped in a drop of darkness. The commander studies this minute detail with the intensity of a man who has nothing else to look at. He watches as the drop begins to lose its sheen, the surface dulling as the dry air sucks the moisture from it. It is a slow process, a microscopic transformation happening in real time. The edges of the drop recede, pulling inward, leaving a faint stain on the polished wood. The wind picks up again, a sudden gust that hits the side of the tent with the force of a physical blow. The canvas booms, a low, drum-like resonance. The flame of the candle is nearly extinguished, bending flat against the melted wax, the blue base of the fire flaring desperately. The shadows in the room whip violently, spinning around the walls in a chaotic dance. The commander does not move. He waits. He trusts the canvas. He trusts the ropes. He trusts the stakes driven into the frozen earth. Slowly, the wind eases, the canvas relaxes, and the flame stands tall again, reclaiming its vertical dominance. The shadows settle back into their corners, crouching and waiting. The cold seems to have deepened in the wake of the gust. The commander can feel it on the tip of his nose, on the high points of his cheeks. The air is sharp, crystalline. It carries the taste of ozone and ice. He pulls his coat tighter, the heavy wool bunching around his neck. The sensation of the rough fabric against his chin is grounding. It is a texture of warmth, a barrier against the smooth, indifferent cold of the air. He looks at the map again. His eyes trace the line of a river that is currently a ribbon of ice. He imagines the water flowing beneath the surface, dark and silent, moving towards the sea. Even in the freeze, there is movement deep down. The candle is shorter now. An inch of wax has been consumed by the fire. The passage of time is measured in height. The pool of melted wax at the base is wider, a liquid lake contained by a rim of solidifying tallow. The light has shifted slightly lower, changing the angle of the shadows, lengthening the darkness behind the inkwell, stretching the shade of the chair legs across the floor. The visual composition of the room is evolving, stroke by slow stroke. The vintage drawing is being erased and redrawn, minute by minute, by the changing light. The commander's gaze drifts to the corner of the tent where his sleeping cot sits. It is a simple structure, canvas stretched over a wooden frame, piled high with furs and blankets. It looks inviting, a soft, dark mound in the gloom, but he is not ready for sleep. To sleep is to surrender vigilance. To sleep is to let the fire die. And so he remains at the desk, the guardian of the flame. He is the watcher in the night. He is the consciousness of the camp. He brings his hands together, interlocking the gloved fingers. He squeezes them tight, feeling the pressure, testing the circulation. The leather creates a dull, creaking friction. He rests his chin on his clasped hands, his eyes half-lidded. The scene blurs slightly, the sharp edges of the objects softening into the pastel haze of fatigue. The yellow light of the candle becomes a halo, a glowing orb that pulses gently. The sound of the wind becomes a rhythm, a lullaby of desolate, empty space. There is a draft near the floorboards, a persistent stream of cold air that feels like water flowing over his boots. He imagines the snow outside, piling up against the canvas, rising inch by inch. The white silence accumulating. The camp is being buried slowly, softly. The world is being erased by white. And inside this small pocket of air, the commander holds back the erasure with a single candle and the heat of his own blood. The texture of the moment is heavy. It is a tangible weight that rests on his shoulders, on the desk, on the tent poles. It is the weight of the atmosphere, the weight of the history that has brought them to this valley, the weight of the decisions that cannot be made until the ice melts. It is a boring, heavy, crushing weight. And yet there is a peace in it, a simplicity. There are no complexities here. There is only the binary of heat and cold, light and dark, life and the void. He looks back at the flame. It is the only thing that is truly alive in the tent. It consumes, it moves, it breathes, it fights the darkness. He feels a strange kinship with the wax. He too is being consumed slowly, hour by hour, by the duty of the command. He too is standing tall against the draft, trying to maintain his light. The metaphor is obvious, simple, and tired, much like the commander himself. He watches a speck of dust drift into the flame and vanish in a tiny spark, a momentary flash of brightness that is gone before it can be fully registered. The map lies flat. The mountains on the paper do not change. The rivers do not flow. The ink remains dry. The silence of the tent is a library silence, a church silence, a silence that demands reverence. The commander respects the silence. He does not break it with a cough or a sigh. He exists within it, a component of the quiet. The visual style of the room is one of deep, shadowed stillness. The charcoal lines of the tent folds are static. The pastel blue of the shadows is deep and rich. The warm yellow of the candlelight is the focal point, the eye of the composition, drawing the gaze inward, away from the cold edges of the frame. He thinks briefly of the morning, the gray light that will filter through the canvas, the sound of the bugle, thin and brittle in the frozen air, the smoke rising from 100 campfires, the steam of tea, the routine of inspection. But the morning is a distant country. Tonight there is only the candle. Tonight there is only the strategy of endurance. Tonight the commander is a statue of wool and leather, sitting in a tent at the edge of the world, watching the light fight the dark. The wind moans again, a long, low sound that seems to circle the tent, looking for a way in. It runs its icy fingers along the canvas, testing the tension. The tent holds, the commander sits, the candle burns. The night deepens, the charcoal gray darkening to a nearly pure black at the edges of the vision. The center holds, the light holds. The story of the night is written in the slow dripping of the wax and the steady rhythm of the breath. The candle has shortened by the width of a man's thumb, a small but measurable sacrifice to the passing of the hour. Its light is now a deeper, richer gold, the flame having settled into the heart of the wax pool where it burns with a steady, unblinking intensity. The circle of illumination on the desk has tightened, the edges of the light more defined against the encroaching shadows of the tent's periphery. The map, once a vast expanse of white and gray, now seems to breathe under the shifting warmth, the parchment expanding and contracting in the microscopic shifts of temperature. The commander remains seated, his posture unchanged, a monument of heavy fabric and quiet intent. He is watching the way the light catches the crystalline structure of the rime ice that has begun to form on the brass rivets of his field chest. The ice is not a smooth glaze. It is a forest of tiny, jagged needles, rendered in the sharpest white pencil against the deep, burnished brown of the wood and the dull gold of the metal. Each needle is a delicate stroke of frost, a testament to the absolute stillness of the air inside the tent, where the cold can build its intricate structures undisturbed. The silence is not an absence of sound, but a presence of weight. It is a thick, velvety layer that sits upon the room, muting the world outside until the wind becomes nothing more than a ghost of a vibration. Within this silence, the smallest sounds are magnified into events. The soft, rhythmic tick of the cooling metal in the lantern hanging from the center pole. The dry, paper-thin rustle of a single flake of soot drifting from the candle wick to the desk. The low, guttural creak of the floorboards as the earth beneath them shifts under the tightening grip of the frost. These sounds do not disrupt the quiet, they define it. They are the punctuation marks in a long, unceasing sentence of endurance. The commander listens to the sound of his own heart, a slow, muffled drumbeat deep beneath the layers of wool and fur. It is a distant, steady rhythm, the sound of a machine running at its lowest possible speed to conserve the precious heat of its core. The visual composition of the tent is a study in chiaroscuro, a dramatic play of light and shadow that feels as though it has been layered onto the canvas with heavy, wax-based pastels. The darks are not empty. They are filled with the texture of the charcoal surface, a grainy depth that suggests more than it reveals. The folds of the tent walls are deep canyons of indigo and midnight blue, while the highlights are soft, smudged applications of cream and pale yellow. The commander's face is a landscape of shadows, the light catching only the ridge of his brow, the bridge of his nose, and the edge of his jaw. The rest is lost to the gloom, a silhouette of authority and fatigue. He does not blink often. His eyes are fixed on the point where the candle flame meets the wick, the blue-hot center of the fire that seems to contain all the energy of the room. On the map, the mountain ranges appear as raised ridges in the flickering light, their shaded western slopes disappearing into the dark. The commander lets his gaze wander across the paper peaks, imagining the reality they represent. Out there, in the true dark, the mountains are giants of stone and ice, their summits lost in the swirling clouds of the high-altitude storms. The wind there does not moan. It shrieks, a tectonic voice that tears at the very fabric of the world. But here, the mountains are mere marks of ink, silent and manageable. He traces the path of a mountain pass with his mind, a narrow thread of possibility through the impassable. In the drawing of his reality, the pass is a smudge of gray, a place where the pastel has been rubbed thin to show the paper beneath. It is a fragile thing, a hope rendered in lead, and he treats it with the reverence of a monk contemplating a holy text. The air in the tent has grown heavier, the oxygen seemingly thinned by the cold and the constant presence of the flame. Each breath the commander takes is a deliberate act, a slow expansion of the chest followed by a long, controlled release. The white vapor of his breath is thinner now, more transparent, as his body temperature stabilizes against the environment. He is becoming a part of the tent, a part of the furniture, a part of the winter itself. The boundaries between his skin and the air, between his coat and the chair, are beginning to blur in the dim light. He is a figure in a drawing that is being slowly overworked, the lines becoming softer, the colors blending until the distinction between the subject and the background is lost. He reaches for the inkwell again, not to write, but to feel the weight of the glass. It is heavy, cold, and solid. The glass is hand-blown, filled with tiny bubbles that look like frozen stars trapped in a dark sea. He turns it slowly between his thumb and forefinger, the movement so gradual it is almost imperceptible. The black ink inside shifts, a sluggish tide of shadow that catches the golden light of the candle. It is a liquid darkness, a concentrated essence of the night outside. He thinks of all the orders that have been written with this ink, all the lives that have been moved across the map by the stroke of a pen. In the stillness of the tent, those movements seem abstract, a distant history that has no bearing on the immediate reality of the cold. The only truth is the weight of the glass and the heat of the flame. The texture of the tent canvas is a constant source of fascination. In the low light, the weave of the fabric becomes a grid, a mathematical structure that holds back the chaos of the storm. He can see the individual threads, the rough, unrefined hemp that has been beaten and woven into this protective shell. There are places where the thread is frayed, tiny fibers standing up like the hairs on an arm, catching the light and creating a soft, luminous fuzz along the edges of the shadows. It is a humble material, yet it is the only thing standing between the army and the void. He feels a deep, quiet gratitude for the canvas, for its stubbornness, for its refusal to tear under the pressure of the wind. It is a silent partner in his command, a guardian that asks for nothing but to be held tight by the ropes. Outside, the snow has begun to fall again. It is not a heavy storm, but a quiet, persistent descent of frozen dust. He can hear the sound of it hitting the tent, a dry, rasping sound like sand being thrown against a drum. SHHH, SHHH, SHHH. It is the sound of the world being covered, layer by layer, in a shroud of white. The snow is building up on the roof of the tent, a heavy blanket that will eventually insulate them from the wind, but for now it is merely weight. He can see the canvas sag slightly under the accumulation, the wooden center pole groaning as it accepts the new burden. The sound is a low, vibrational hum that travels down the pole and into the floor, a physical reminder of the gravity of the winter. The commander shifts his gaze to the lantern hanging above him. It is not lit, its glass soot-stained and dark, but it remains a part of the geometry of the room. The metal frame is a skeleton of black lines, a cage for a light that is not needed. It sways almost imperceptibly, a pendulum marking the heartbeat of the tent. He watches the sway, his head tilting slightly to follow the motion. It is hypnotic, a slow, rhythmic movement that pulls at his consciousness, inviting him to let go of the vigil and drift into the gray mists of sleep. But he resists. The strategy requires his presence. The candlelight requires his witness. He remains anchored to the desk, his hands resting on the map like stones. The smell of the tent has changed. The initial scent of damp wool and cold earth has been replaced by the more complex aroma of the burning tallow and the drying parchment. It is a dry, dusty smell, the scent of an archive or a tomb. It is the smell of time being preserved. He inhales deeply, filling his lungs with the stagnant air, feeling the way it settles inside him. There is no freshness here, no movement of air to clear the senses. There is only the repetition of the breath and the steady consumption of the wax. He feels a sense of profound isolation, as if the tent is a small wooden boat adrift in a vast, dark ocean of ice. The rest of the army, the thousands of men sleeping in their rows of white tents, feels like a memory of a different life. Here, in the circle of the candle, he is the only person who exists. He looks down at his boots. They are caked with dried mud and salt, the leather cracked and worn. In the shadows, they look like part of the floor, two dark shapes rooted in the wood. He can no longer feel his toes, but the numbness is not painful. It is a quiet, distant sensation, a signal from a limb that has already begun to hibernate. He welcomes the numbness. It is one less thing to manage, one less distraction from the stillness. He is becoming a statue, a work of art rendered in the medium of endurance. The colored pencil of the artist has captured the weariness in the curve of his shoulders, the heaviness in the tilt of his head. Every stroke of the pencil is a minute of the night, every layer of pastel a degree of the cold. The light of the candle reaches the edge of a silver flask sitting on the far corner of the desk. The metal is dull, tarnished by the damp, but it catches a single, sharp glint of fire. The flask is a relic of a warmer world, a gift from a time when the sun had heat and the wind carried the scent of grass. Now, it is just another object in the composition, a cold cylinder of metal that reflects the emptiness of the room. The commander does not reach for it. He does not need the false warmth of the spirit. He is sustained by the cold, by the purity of the struggle against the environment. The flask remains in the shadows, a forgotten detail in the corner of the drawing. The wind outside makes a new sound, a low, whistling tone as it passes over the vent at the peak of the tent. It is a flute-like sound, a mournful melody that seems to be searching for a lost chord. It rises and falls, a soundtrack to the desolation of the valley. The commander listens to the music of the wind, finding a strange comfort in its consistency. It is a reminder that the world is still there, that the elements are still moving, even if he is stationary. The wind is the only thing that has the strength to speak in this landscape. Everything else, the men, the horses, the trees, has been silenced by the ice. He turns his attention back to the map. A small insect, a winter moth perhaps, has found its way into the tent and is now crawling across the representation of a forest. Its movements are jerky, uncertain, its tiny legs grappling with the texture of the parchment. The commander watches the moth. It is a fragile life, a speck of animation in a world of stasis. He does not move to harm it. He simply observes its progress. The moth reaches the edge of the candle's warmth and pauses, its wings vibrating with a microscopic intensity. It is drawn to the light, but the heat is a barrier. It circles the base of the candle, a tiny satellite orbiting a dying sun. The commander finds himself rooting for the moth, hoping it finds a way to survive the night, though he knows the odds are against it. The candle gutters. A small air pocket in the wax has burst, causing the flame to jump and sputter. For a fraction of a second, the light flares brightly, casting sharp, jagged shadows against the walls before settling back into its steady glow. The moth is gone, perhaps retreated into the darkness or fallen into the wax. The commander remains, his eyes reflecting the momentary flare. The interruption has broken the flow of his thoughts, leaving him in a state of pure, unthinking observation. He is no longer strategizing. He is simply being. He is a part of the chiaroscuro, a part of the vintage drawing, a part of the long, slow history of the cold. The texture of the air seems to thicken further. It is as if the darkness itself is a physical substance, a fine silt that is settling over everything in the room. He can almost see it in the light of the candle, tiny motes of dust and ice dancing in the golden beam. Each mote is a universe, a tiny point of light that exists for a moment before vanishing into the shadows. The commander watches the dance, his breath slowing even further, his heartbeat a distant echo. The night is a long, slow process of sedimentation, the world being built up layer by layer until nothing remains of the original form. He looks at the quill pen again. The ink on the nib has dried completely, forming a dark, crusty shell. He picks up a small knife from the desk, its blade thin and sharp, and begins to scrape the dried ink away. The sound is a tiny metallic rasp, a microscopic scratching that fills the tent. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It is a deliberate, repetitive action, a way to focus the mind on a single physical task. He watches the flakes of black ink fall onto the map, tiny grains of sand on the paper mountains. He is cleaning the tool, preparing for a moment of action that may never come. But the preparation is the point. The preparation is the duty. The knife blade catches the candlelight, a sliver of silver that moves back and forth with the rhythm of his hand. The movement is slow, hypnotic, a mirror to the swaying of the lantern. The commander's focus is absolute. He is not a man leading an army, he is a man cleaning a pen. The scale of his world has shrunk to the point of a knife and the tip of a quill. In this microcosm there is order. There is a problem and a solution. There is the removal of the old to make way for the new. It is a satisfying task, a small victory over the stagnation of the night. When the nib is clean, he sets the knife down with a soft clack. The sound resonates in the stillness, a finality that marks the end of the hour. The candle is now significantly shorter, its life force half spent. The pool of wax has reached the edge of the brass holder and is beginning to drip over the side, a slow-motion waterfall of gold that hardens as it falls. The commander watches the drip. It is a beautiful thing, a sculpture made of time and gravity. It is a testament to the slow, relentless movement of the world, even when it appears to be standing still. The shadows in the tent are now long and thin, like the fingers of a giant reaching for the center of the room. They move with the flickering of the flame, a constant, silent animation. The commander sits in the heart of this shadow play, a calm center in a world of shifting darkness. He is the master of this small domain, the keeper of the light, the strategist of the candlelight. He prepares himself for the next hour, for the next layer of snow, for the next degree of cold. The night is far from over, and the story of the ice has only just begun to be written. He closes his eyes for a count of 10. 1. The sound of the wind. 2. The weight of the coat. 3. The smell of the wax. 4. The numbness in his feet. 5. The throb of his pulse. 6. The groaning of the tent pole. 7. The rasp of the snow. 8. The heat of the candle on his face. 9. The silence. 10. He opens his eyes. The scene is the same. The vintage drawing remains on the table. The pastel tones are deep and cold. The commander is still there, his hands on the map, his gaze on the flame. He is the anchor. He is the endurance. He is the history of the winter, told in the slow, monotone language of the freeze. The texture of the map under his fingers feels like skin, old, weathered, and full of stories. He traces a line that represents a ridge, his fingertip moving over the rough surface of the paper. He can feel the grain, the tooth, the physical reality of the parchment. It is a solid thing in an uncertain world. He takes comfort in the map, in its permanence, in its promise that the land is still there, even if it is currently invisible. He is the guardian of the land, the one who remembers what lies beneath the white. He is the memory of the earth. The candle flame leans to the left, pulled by an invisible current of air. It stretches out, becoming a long, thin needle of fire before snapping back to the center. The shadows jump in response, a sudden, frantic movement that breaks the stillness for a heartbeat. Then the silence returns, heavier than before. The commander does not react. He has seen the flame dance 1,000 times. He has seen the shadows leap and crawl. He is unmoved by the drama of the light. He is interested only in the steady burn, the constant presence, the slow consumption of the night. He looks at the clock on the desk. It is a heavy, brass affair, its face glass-covered and etched with Roman numerals. The hands are thin black lines, moving with a mechanical precision that seems out of place in the organic darkness of the tent. The tick-tick-tick of the mechanism is a sharp, metallic sound, a contrast to the soft, muffled sounds of the winter. It is a reminder that time is a human invention, a way to segment the eternal into manageable pieces. But here, in the freeze, the clock feels like an intruder. The only true measure of time is the candle and the snow. The commander ignores the clock, preferring the more honest measurement of the wax. The night is a vast, charcoal-drawn expanse, and the commander's tent is the only point of detail in the composition. Everything else has been smudged away, lost to the heavy application of the dark pastel. He sits at his desk, a figure of silent endurance, a man who has become a part of the landscape he is trying to conquer. The strategy by candlelight is a strategy of patience, of waiting for the world to turn, of holding the line against the void. It is a boring, repetitive, and essential task. And he will perform it until the light fails or the dawn arrives. The candle flame remains the solitary protagonist in this drama of stillness, its height now reduced to a mere fraction of its original stature. It sits within a crater of its own making, a jagged rim of white tallow that has solidified into an irregular crown. The light it emits has taken on a more amber hue, filtered through the translucent walls of the wax reservoir, casting a glow that feels heavier, more viscous, as if the illumination itself has been thickened by the drop in temperature. This light crawls across the surface of the heavy oak-field desk, illuminating the grain of the wood with a microscopic clarity that reveals every scar, every indentation, and every spill of ink from campaigns long forgotten. The wood is old, sourced from a forest that likely no longer stands, and its surface has been polished by the friction of 1,000 maps and the weight of 1,000 resting elbows. In the vintage drawing of this scene, the wood is rendered with a series of horizontal charcoal strokes, overlaid with a wash of deep burnt sienna, creating a texture that looks as though it could be felt by the fingertip. A dry, splintered history that resists the encroaching damp. The commander's hand remains near the map, his fingers motionless, appearing almost as if they have been sculpted from the same dark leather as his gloves. The leather is aged, its surface a network of fine cracks and creases that mirror the topography of the lands he is tasked with holding. The light catches the high points of these creases, turning them into tiny, golden ridges that parallel the mountain ranges depicted on the parchment. There is a profound sense of continuity between the man and his tools. The coat, the desk, the map, and the skin are all part of a single, unified composition of endurance. The cold has acted as a binding agent, fusing these elements together into a singular, frozen entity. He feels the weight of the wool across his shoulders, a heavy, oppressive burden that nonetheless provides the only shield against the predatory air. The wool is coarse, a rough-hewn fabric that smells of lanolin and the smoke of distant fires, a scent that is becoming more pronounced as the moisture in the tent rises. Beyond the immediate circle of the desk, the corners of the tent have become repositories for the absolute dark. The transition from the warm, amber glow of the candle to the deep, Prussian blue of the shadows is not a sharp line, but a soft, smudged gradient, much like the transition of a pastel drawing, where the artist has used a cloth to blend the colors into a seamless void. In these shadows, the shapes of crates and supply trunks loom like the hulls of sunken ships, their contents, rations, ammunition, cold steel, rendered irrelevant by the current state of the world. There is no need for bread or bullets when the air itself is the primary adversary. The commander knows they are there, a silent inventory of his responsibility, but he does not look at them. His gaze is held captive by the map, by the lines of ink that represent a world he can no longer see. The map is a thick, heavy parchment that has absorbed the humidity of the frozen night, causing its edges to curl and undulate like a slow-motion sea. It is a living thing, reacting to the environment in ways that the commander finds perversely fascinating. He watches as a corner of the paper slowly lifts, perhaps a millimeter every 10 minutes, responding to a microscopic change in the air's moisture or a slight shift in the tension of the desk's surface. This is the pace of the night, the slow, upward crawl of a piece of paper. The lines drawn upon it, the borders, the roads, the rivers, remain static, but the medium itself is in flux. It is a reminder that even the most carefully laid plans are subject to the whims of the physical world, to the expansion of ice and the contraction of heat. Outside, the wind has entered a new phase of its nocturnal cycle. It no longer beats against the canvas with sudden gusts. Instead, it has settled into a long, continuous moan, a single, sustained note that vibrates through the tent poles and into the very marrow of the commander's bones. It is a sound of immense, hollow distance, the sound of air traveling over miles of uninhabited wasteland where there is nothing to break its momentum. To the commander, it sounds like the breathing of a great, slumbering beast, a creature composed of frost and shadow that has laid its heavy body across the valley. The sound is hypnotic, a low-frequency drone that pulls the mind toward a state of suspension, where thoughts become slow and heavy, drifting like the snowflakes that are currently burying the camp. He considers the men in the tents surrounding his own. He imagines them lying in their bedrolls, their breath forming plumes of frost on the underside of their blankets. They are silent, a legion of ghosts waiting for a command that will not come until the sun returns to claim the sky. There is a strange, cold intimacy in this shared suffering, a bond formed by the common experience of the freeze. They are all, in their own way, artists of the dark, rendering their own survival in the charcoal of their endurance. The commander feels the weight of their collective silence. It is a physical pressure, a duty that anchors him to his chair and prevents him from seeking the comfort of his own furs. He must remain awake so that they may sleep. He must remain the point of consciousness in a camp that has succumbed to the hibernation of the spirit. The visual texture of the scene is dominated by the grain of the charcoal surface on which it is drawn. Every shadow is infused with this grain, a fine, sandpaper-like quality that gives the darkness a sense of mass and reality. The commander's shadow on the rear wall of the tent is a towering, distorted figure, its head lost in the upper reaches where the canvas meets the peak. This shadow does not move with the fluidity of a person. It shifts with the stutter of the candle, a series of discrete, jerky replacements that suggest a world made of individual frames rather than a continuous flow of time. It is a primitive animation, a silhouette theater played out for an audience of one. He looks at the water basin in the corner of the tent. A thin skin of ice has formed over its surface, a transparent lens that distorts the reflection of the candle. The ice is not smooth. It is patterned with dendritic structures, delicate, fern-like shapes that have grown outward from the rim toward the center. These are the patterns of the cold, the geometry of the 0-degree world. They are beautiful in their indifference, a crystalline art form that requires no observer to justify its existence. The commander watches the way the light catches these frozen fronds, turning them into threads of silver and glass. He thinks about how easily a single movement, a single touch, would shatter this delicate construction. The world is currently a fragile architecture of ice, and any sudden action risks bringing it all down in a shower of shards. The smell of the candle is now a constant companion, a heavy, waxy scent that has permeated the wool of his coat and the hair of his beard. It is a scent that signifies time's consumption. Every molecule of wax that is vaporized and released into the air is a moment of the night that has been successfully negotiated. He inhales the scent, finding it strangely grounding. It is a man-made smell in a world that has become entirely elemental. It is the smell of the human effort to maintain a pocket of order in the face of the encroaching chaos of the winter. He finds himself breathing in rhythm with the flicker of the flame, a synchronized existence where his own life force is mirrored by the burning wick. His hand, still resting on the map, begins to feel like a separate object, something heavy and cold that does not quite belong to him. The numbness has migrated from his fingertips to his wrist, a slow, creeping tide of sensationless weight. He does not try to warm it. He does not rub his hands together or tuck them into his armpits. He simply accepts the loss of feeling as a necessary toll for his presence. The cold is a teacher, and its lesson is the necessity of letting go of comfort, letting go of the sensation of the body, letting go of the need for movement. To stay still is to survive. To stay still is to become as immovable as the mountains on the map. The candle gutters slightly, the flame dipping as it encounters a small impurity in the wax. For a moment, the room dims, the shadows expanding to reclaim the territory they had lost to the light. The commander's heart rate does not increase. He does not reach out to shield the flame. He simply waits. The flame recovers, standing tall and steady once again, and the shadows retreat to their respective corners. It is a small victory, a minor skirmish in the long war of the night. He turns his attention to the inkwell, which sits like a dark, obsidian eye on the corner of the desk. The ink within is nearly frozen, its surface a black, viscous mirror that reflects nothing but the void. He thinks of the letters he should be writing, the reports he should be filing, the words of encouragement he should be preparing for the morning. But the words are as frozen as the ink. They are trapped beneath the surface, unable to flow, unable to be articulated in the heavy air of the tent. The silence is punctuated by the sound of the tent rope straining against the wind. It is a rhythmic, creaking sound, the sound of hemp being pulled to its absolute limit. Creak, creak. It is the sound of tension, of the constant struggle between the shelter and the storm. The commander feels this tension in his own body, in the tightness of his jaw and the rigidity of his spine. He is the central pole of this tent, the vertical axis upon which the entire structure of the command depends. If he were to slump, if he were to close his eyes, the tension would be lost, and the shelter would collapse under the weight of the night. He maintains his posture, a study in perpendicularity against the horizontal drift of the snow. The vintage quality of the drawing is most evident in the way the light interacts with the textures of the room. The pastel is applied thickly in the center of the flame, a brilliant, almost white application that is surrounded by rings of yellow and orange. These colors do not blend into the background so much as they sit on top of it, creating a physical depth to the light. The shadows, conversely, are layered, with multiple shades of blue and black built up to create a sense of infinite distance. The commander is caught between these two extremes, a figure rendered in the mid-tones, the grays and browns of the human middle ground. He is the bridge between the light and the dark, the mediator between the fire and the frost. He begins to notice the sound of his own breathing again. It has become louder in the silence, a raspy, rhythmic intake and exhale that seems to echo off the canvas walls. It is a damp sound, a sound of moisture and heat meeting the dry, cold air. Each breath is a small cloud of pastel white vapor that rises and drifts toward the candle, where it is momentarily illuminated before vanishing into the shadows. He watches these clouds, seeing them as tiny, transient ghosts of his own vitality. They are the only things moving in the room, the only things that possess the freedom of flight. He follows their progress with his eyes, a slow, pendulous motion that mirrors the swaying of the unlit lantern. The cold seems to have a color. It is not white, as one might expect from the snow, but a deep, resonant indigo that saturates everything beyond the reach of the candle. It is a color that suggests depth and density, a color that one could drown in. The commander feels this indigo pressing against the tent, seeking out the smallest cracks in the canvas, the most minute gaps in the floorboards. It is a patient color, a color that knows it has all the time in the world. It does not need to rush. It only needs to wait for the light to fail. The commander stares into the indigo shadows, his eyes unblinking, challenging the darkness to move. But the darkness remains still, a silent, immovable presence that absorbs the sound of the wind and the creaking of the ropes. On the desk, the silver flask catches the light once again, a single, sharp spark of silver in the amber gloom. It is a reminder of the world of metals and fire, of the forge and the foundry. It is a hard object in a world that has become soft with shadows and snow. The commander finds himself focusing on that spark, using it as a navigational point in the vastness of the room. It is a small, bright reality, a fixed point of light that does not flicker. He draws strength from its constancy, from its refusal to be dimmed by the atmosphere. The flask is a symbol of endurance, a vessel that holds its shape regardless of the temperature. He aspires to be like the metal, cold, hard, and unchanging. The night stretches out before him, an endless plain of gray and blue. There is no sense of time passing, only the gradual consumption of the candle and the gradual accumulation of the snow. The hours have lost their meaning, replaced by a single continuous moment of waiting. He is waiting for the light to change, for the air to shift, for the world to begin its slow turn back toward the sun. But for now, there is only the strategy of the candlelight, the quiet, repetitive work of staying alive. He adjusts his position slightly, the wood of the chair protesting with a low, mournful groan. The sound is an event, a major occurrence in the history of the hour. He listens as the sound fades away, absorbed by the wool of his coat and the canvas of the walls, until the silence is once again absolute. The texture of the air is now so thick that he can almost feel it against his skin, a grainy, particulate quality that suggests the very atoms of the room are freezing. He imagines the air as a sea of tiny ice crystals, a mist of frozen diamonds that are slowly settling over the map and the desk. This is how the world ends, he thinks, not with a bang, but with a slow, crystalline silence. The vintage drawing of this moment would show the air as a series of fine, white dots, a stippling of frost across the entire composition. It is a beautiful, terrifying vision, a world transformed into a museum of its own stillness. The commander's thoughts drift to the concept of duty. It is a heavy word, a word that carries the weight of the heavy wool and the frozen earth. It is not an abstract idea but a physical reality, a force that keeps him in his chair when every instinct in his body is screaming for him to lie down and sleep. Duty is the candle that he must keep burning. Duty is the map that he must continue to study. Duty is the silence that he must inhabit. He accepts this burden without resentment, for it is the only thing that gives the night a purpose. Without duty, he would be just another creature huddled against the cold. With it, he is a commander, a guardian, a witness to the winter. He looks at the quill once more. It is a fragile thing, a feather from a bird that probably flew south months ago. It is a remnant of a more mobile, more fluid world. Here, it is an instrument of stasis, a tool that has no purpose in the current freeze. He reaches out and touches the feather, feeling the individual barbs against his gloved finger. They are stiff and dry, ready to snap at the slightest pressure. He withdraws his hand, leaving the quill where it lies. It is a part of the still life on the desk, a detail in the drawing that will remain unchanged for the duration of the night. The wind rises to a crescendo, a howling, mournful sound that seems to fill the entire valley. The tent shudders, the canvas flapping with a sound like distant thunder. The commander feels the vibration in the floorboards, a low-frequency hum that travels through his boots and into his legs. He remains unmoved. He is the anchor. He is the still point in the center of the storm. He watches the candle flame as it bows before the wind, its light flickering wildly across the map. The shadows on the walls dance a frantic, jagged dance, but they cannot escape their corners. The center holds. The commander holds. The strategy continues, one candle-lit second at a time, until the night itself is exhausted by its own coldness. The visual style of the scene is now fully realized, a masterpiece of dark pastel and charcoal, a study in the endurance of light within an ocean of shadow. The deep blues, the charcoal grays, and the warm, amber yellows have blended into a single, cohesive atmosphere. The commander is a part of this atmosphere, a figure drawn with heavy lines and deep shading, a man who has become the very essence of the winter night. He sits, he breathes, he waits. And the world outside continues to disappear beneath the white, silent weight of the snow. The candle has burned down further, its height now a mere nub that sits nestled within a translucent crater of solidified tallow. The flame, though smaller, seems to have gained a peculiar intensity, a concentrated point of golden fire that illuminates the center of the desk with a steady, unblinking glare. This light is the heart of the drawing, the single warm highlight in a composition dominated by the cold, grainy texture of deep blue and charcoal gray pastels. The light does not travel far. It reaches the edge of the map, lingers on the brass hilt of a letter opener, and then is abruptly swallowed by the heavy, light-absorbing shadows that fill the rest of the tent. These shadows are not empty spaces. They are thick with the suggestion of form, rendered in layered strokes of indigo and violet that give the darkness a palpable weight. To look into the corner of the tent is to look into a deep, frozen well, a place where the air has turned into a solid, unmoving mass of cold. The commander's gaze is fixed on the center of the flame. He has reached a state of consciousness that is akin to the stillness of the landscape outside, a slow, rhythmic existence where the passage of time is measured not by minutes, but by the gradual accumulation of frost. His eyes, heavy-lidded and weary, reflect the tiny spark of the candle, two miniature suns burning in the vast dark of his face. He does not blink. He has become a part of the still life, a figure drawn with the same deliberate, heavy lines as the desk and the tent poles. The rough wool of his coat is a landscape unto itself, a series of ridges and valleys formed by the stiff, frozen fabric. The charcoal pencil has captured the way the light catches the stray fibers of the wool, creating a soft, luminous halo around his shoulders, a fragile barrier of heat against the absolute zero of the night. The map beneath his hands is a silent witness to a world that has been erased by the winter. He traces the contour of a valley that lies 3 days' march to the east, a place where the mountains pinch together to form a narrow, treacherous gate. In the drawing, this valley is a smudge of dark gray, a shadow between the white peaks. He imagines the silence of that place, the way the snow must be piling up against the sheer rock faces, the way the wind must be whistling through the narrow gaps with the sound of 1,000 mourning voices. He feels a strange, cold affinity for that valley. It is a place of pure, uncomplicated existence, a place where the only strategy is to remain. He moves his finger a fraction of an inch across the parchment, the sound of the leather glove against the paper, a dry, rasping whisper that is the loudest thing in the room. Outside, the horses in the pickets shift their weight, a muffled thud of a hoof hitting the packed snow. It is a distant, lonely sound, a reminder that there is life beyond the canvas, however stalled and shivering it may be. The sound travels through the frozen earth and up through the floorboards of the tent, a vibration that the commander feels in the soles of his boots. He acknowledges the sound with a slight tilt of his head, a microscopic adjustment of his posture. The horses are enduring, just as the men are enduring, just as he is enduring. They are all components of a vast, slow-moving machine that has been halted by the friction of the ice. The strategy by Candlelight is to ensure that the machine does not rust, that the core remains warm enough to restart when the world finally begins to thaw. The atmosphere in the tent has reached a point of absolute stasis. The air is so cold that it feels brittle, as if a sudden movement might cause it to shatter into 1,000 glittering shards. This sensation is captured in the visual style of the scene, the way the light is rendered with sharp, precise strokes of white and pale yellow pencil, while the shadows are soft, blended, and deep. It is a study in contrasts, a visual representation of the tension between the heat of the flame and the cold of the void. The commander is the pivot point of this tension, the human element that holds the two extremes in balance. He is the guardian of the equilibrium, the one who ensures that the dark does not overwhelm the light. He looks at the inkwell again. A single bubble has risen to the surface of the black fluid, trapped there by the increasing viscosity of the cooling ink. It is a tiny, perfect sphere, reflecting the candle flame in its dark, curved side. He watches the bubble, waiting for it to burst, but the ink is too thick, too close to the point of freezing. The bubble remains, a frozen breath held in a liquid lung. It is a metaphor for his own existence, for the existence of the entire army. They are all trapped in a moment of transition, held in place by the weight of the atmosphere, waiting for a change that seems as though it will never come. The inkwell, rendered in deep blacks and sharp highlights of silver, sits on the desk like a monument to this stillness. The smell of the tent is a heavy, unchanging presence. It is the scent of old wood, of damp canvas, of the fatty, slightly acrid smoke of the tallow candle. It is a smell that suggests age and permanence, a smell that has soaked into the very fibers of the commander's clothing. He inhales it deeply, feeling it coat the inside of his lungs with a layer of cold, dry dust. There is no freshness in the air, no movement from the outside world to clear the stagnation. There is only the repetition of the breath and the steady, slow burn of the wick. He finds a certain comfort in this stagnation. It is predictable, it is manageable, it is a known quantity in an uncertain world. The visual texture of the tent walls is a masterpiece of environmental storytelling. The vintage colored pencil has been used to create a surface that looks rough and weathered, with the weave of the fabric visible in the play of light and shadow. There are places where the frost has formed patterns on the inside of the canvas, delicate, crystalline structures that look like the ghosts of ferns or the skeletons of leaves. These patterns are drawn with the lightest of touches, faint white lines against the deep blue of the background. They are beautiful in their fragility, a reminder that the cold is not just a destructive force, but an artist in its own right, creating intricate works of art that last only as long as the freeze. The commander's shadow on the wall is a dark, immovable shape, its edges softened by the distance from the candle. It looks like a figure carved from stone, a sentinel that has stood in this place for centuries. The shadow does not mimic the subtle movements of the man. It seems to possess a life of its own, a silent, dark twin that is more permanent than the flesh and blood original. He watches the shadow out of the corner of his eye, feeling a sense of companionship with it. In the absolute quiet of the night, the shadow is the only thing that shares his vigil, the only thing that understands the weight of the silence. He thinks about the history of this campaign, not in terms of battles or maps, but in terms of the weather. He remembers the first frost of autumn, a light dusting of white that had seemed almost festive at the time. He remembers the way the ground had slowly hardened, the way the mud of the roads had turned into iron-hard ruts that broke the axles of the supply wagons. He remembers the first heavy snowfall, a quiet, transformative event that had turned the world into a blank, white page. This is the history that matters now, the slow, relentless progression of the winter, the way it has dictated their movements and their thoughts. The strategy is no longer about defeating an enemy. It is about negotiating a truce with the climate. The candle gutters slightly, the flame dipping low as it struggles to find a fresh supply of oxygen in the heavy air. The shadows in the tent lurch forward, momentarily encroaching on the territory of the light. The commander does not react. He knows the flame will recover or it will not. Either way, the darkness is already here. He waits for the flicker to subside, for the light to stabilize. When it does, the room feels smaller, the circle of illumination tighter than before. The darkness is winning, inch by inch, second by second. The charcoal gray of the walls seems to be closing in, a soft, heavy blanket that is being drawn over the world. He reaches for a small piece of charcoal that lies on the edge of the desk. His gloved fingers are clumsy, the leather thick and unresponsive. He picks up the charcoal and holds it over a blank corner of the map. He does not draw. He simply feels the weight of the carbon, the potential for marking the world. The charcoal is a piece of wood that has been transformed by fire, a solid remains of a previous life. It is the same material that the artist uses to render this very scene, a meta-commentary on the nature of reality and representation. He sets the charcoal back down, a small black mark appearing on the parchment where it touched. It is the only thing he has accomplished in the last hour, and it is enough. The silence is punctuated by the sound of the wind, which has now reached a steady, low-frequency hum. It is a sound that bypasses the ears and vibrates directly in the chest, a mournful, hollow tone that suggests the infinite emptiness of the valley outside. The wind is the voice of the dark, a language of cold and distance that the commander has learned to interpret. It tells him of the depth of the snow, of the strength of the ice, of the indifference of the universe to his presence. He listens to the wind, finding a strange peace in its lack of emotion. It does not hate him. It does not even know he is there. It simply exists, a force of nature that he must endure. The visual style of the drawing captures this indifference with its color palette. The deep blues and grays are not the colors of a human world. They are the colors of minerals, of deep water, of the high atmosphere. The only human color is the warm amber of the candle, and even that is being slowly diminished. The drawing is a record of a human soul being absorbed into the landscape, a figure becoming a texture, a thought becoming a silence. The commander is the focus of this process, the point where the warmth of life meets the cold of the infinite. He looks at the clock on the desk. The hands have moved, but the movement feels illusory. In this tent, time does not flow, it accumulates. It is like the snow outside, building up in layers, each minute a fresh flake that settles on the pile. He is being buried in time, just as the camp is being buried in snow. The tick-tick-tick of the brass mechanism is a futile gesture, a small, mechanical protest against the vast, organic stillness of the winter. He ignores it, focusing instead on the way the light catches the dust motes in the air, each one a tiny, illuminated world drifting through the void. The texture of the air is now so thick that he can almost taste it, a dry, metallic flavor that suggests the presence of ice. He imagines the air as a fine powder, a pulverized version of the landscape outside, filling the tent and coating everything in a layer of gray. This is the medium of his thoughts, the substance through which he must navigate his strategy. Everything is heavy. Everything is slow. Everything is cold. He feels the weight of his own eyelids, the effort required to keep them open. He does not want to sleep. He wants to witness. He wants to be the one who sees the night through to its end, the one who does not blink in the face of the dark. The rime ice on the brass rivets of the field chest has grown. The tiny, needle-like crystals have extended their reach, forming a delicate, jagged fringe along the edge of the metal. In the vintage drawing, these crystals are rendered with a sharp white pencil, each one a minute, precise stroke of light. They look like frozen electricity, a static discharge of the cold. The commander watches the ice, fascinated by its slow, crystalline growth. It is a form of life, he thinks, a cold, mineral life that thrives in the absence of heat. He feels a sense of kinship with the ice. He, too, is a crystalline structure, a rigid, orderly thing that has been built up by the cold. The smell of the wax is stronger now, a thick, cloying scent that fills his nostrils and clings to the back of his throat. It is the smell of survival, the smell of the human effort to maintain a light in the wilderness. He finds himself breathing in time with the flickering of the flame, a synchronized existence that is both hypnotic and draining. His heart beats with a slow, heavy rhythm, a muffled sound that seems to come from deep within the earth. He is the heart of the camp, the steady pulse that keeps the organism alive through the long, frozen night. The visual composition of the room is a study in stillness. The lines are horizontal and vertical, with no diagonal movements to suggest action or excitement. The commander is a vertical line. The desk is a horizontal line. The tent pole is a vertical line. This geometry creates a sense of stability and permanence, a world that is held in place by its own weight. The vintage quality of the drawing, the grain of the paper, the softness of the pastels, gives the scene a sense of history, as if it is a memory that has been preserved in a dusty archive. It is a story that has already been told, a night that has already been endured. He turns his gaze back to the map. A small, dark shape caught in the fold of the parchment catches his eye. It is a dried leaf, perhaps brought in by the wind weeks ago or carried from a southern forest in the pocket of a soldier. It is a brittle brown thing, its veins visible like a skeletal hand. In the candlelight, it looks like a piece of ancient manuscript, a fragment of a lost world. The commander touches the leaf, his gloved finger making a soft, crunching sound. The leaf shatters into a dozen tiny pieces, becoming part of the dust that coats the desk. It is a reminder of the fragility of the living, of the ease with which the cold can break the structures of the past. The wind outside changes its tone, rising to a higher, more piercing note. It sounds like a flute played by a giant, a single sustained melody that speaks of loneliness and ice. The tent ropes strain and groan, the canvas snapping with the sound of a pistol shot. The commander does not flinch. He has heard the voice of the wind many times, and he knows that it is merely air moving from one void to another. He waits for the gust to pass, for the silence to return. When it does, the quiet feels deeper, more profound, as if the wind has sucked the last remaining sounds out of the world. He looks at the candle. It is almost gone. The flame is now a tiny, blue-bottomed teardrop floating in a lake of clear, liquid wax. It is a fragile, beautiful thing, a small piece of the sun that has been brought into the dark. He knows that when the candle dies, he will have to light another or sit in the absolute dark. The thought of the dark does not frighten him. It is simply another state of being, another layer of the drawing. But for now, he chooses the light. He reaches for a fresh candle that lies in the drawer of the desk, his hand moving with the slow, deliberate grace of a man who is moving through water. The drawer opens with a low, wooden rasp, a sound that feels like a violation of the silence. Inside, the fresh candles are lined up like soldiers, white and pure and indifferent. He selects one, feeling its smooth, waxy surface against his glove. It is cold, a cylinder of potential heat. He sets it on the desk, a new vertical line in the composition. The old candle continues to burn, its flame flickering as if it knows its time is short. The commander watches the two candles, the one that is dying and the one that is yet to live. It is the story of the campaign, the story of the world. One light fails, and another is lit to take its place. The visual style of the scene remains consistent, a dark, grainy masterpiece of vintage pastels. The new candle is a bright white shape against the deep blue of the desk, a point of hope in the sea of shadows. The commander is the one who will bridge the gap between the two lights, the one who will ensure that the continuity of the vigil is not broken. He prepares himself for the transition, his eyes fixed on the dying flame. He is the strategist of the candlelight, the master of the slow, cold night. He will not let the dark win. He will stay awake. He will remain. The night is far from over. The snow continues to fall, a silent white accumulation that is erasing the world outside. Inside the tent, the commander sits, a figure of charcoal and wool watching the light. The strategy is simple: endure. The history is boring. It is the history of the freeze. And the story is long, told in the slow, hypnotic rhythm of the breath and the flame. He waits for the moment to strike the match, for the moment to bring the new light to life. Until then, he sits in the amber glow of the dying candle, a witness to the beauty and the terror of the winter. The moment of transition arrives with the inevitability of a sunset in midwinter. The original candle, having served its purpose through the long, indigo hours of the deep night, finally reaches the terminus of its wick. The flame does not merely go out. It undergoes a slow, agonizing surrender. The commander watches as the fire sinks into the liquid reservoir of the tallow, the blue base of the flame expanding to consume the last vestiges of oxygen trapped against the surface of the melted wax. It is a microscopic struggle, a battle between the energy of the fire and the cold gravity of the fuel. The light begins to pulse, a rhythmic, dying heartbeat that throws long, erratic shadows against the canvas walls of the tent. These shadows, rendered in heavy charcoal strokes on the dark paper of the room, lurch and recoil, appearing like giant, spectral hands trying to grasp the center pole. The commander remains perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the guttering light. He waits for the exact moment of extinction, the brief interval of absolute shadow that will bridge the gap between the old light and the new. Then, with a soft, final hiss, the wick vanishes beneath the surface of the liquid. The flame snaps into a single, needle-thin trail of gray smoke that rises toward the peak of the tent. The darkness that follows is not a void, but a presence. It is a deep, resonant Prussian blue, a color so saturated that it feels like a physical weight against the skin. In this sudden absence of the amber glow, the commander's eyes must adjust to the textures of the night. The vintage drawing of this scene would be composed entirely of dark grays and deep indigos, with the only definition coming from the rough tooth of the paper itself. He can feel the cold pressing in more aggressively now that the small sun of the candle has been extinguished. It is a silent, predatory cold that moves across the floorboards and climbs the legs of the field desk. He reaches for the matchbox, his hand moving with the sluggish, deliberate pace of a creature submerged in deep water. The box is small, made of a thin, grainy wood that has been polished by use. He can feel the texture of the striking surface, a rough, sand-like strip that holds the potential for fire. The act of striking a match in this absolute stillness is a monumental event. It is a disruption of the silence, a violation of the cold's hegemony. The commander selects a single wooden match, its head a dark, bulbous red, and holds it against the striking surface. He pauses, savoring the anticipation of the spark. In his mind, he sees the history of the match, the timber from the northern forests, the chemical vats where the phosphorus was prepared, the labor of 1,000 distant hands. All of that history is now concentrated in the tip of this small sliver of wood. He applies pressure, the leather of his glove creaking softly in the dark. Then he strikes. The sound is a sharp, dry rasp, scritch, that echoes off the canvas walls like a pistol shot. For a fraction of a second, there is only friction. Then the phosphorus ignites. A sudden, violent flare of white and orange light erupts in the center of the tent. It is a blinding sun in a miniature universe. The commander flinches instinctively, his pupils contracting against the brilliance of the chemical fire. The smell of sulfur fills the air, a sharp, acrid scent that cuts through the stagnant smell of damp wool and cold earth. It is a primitive, powerful smell, the scent of the forge and the lightning. He holds the match steady, watching as the flame travels down the wooden stick, the fire consuming the grain of the timber with a tiny, audible crackle. The light from the match is different from the candlelight. It is harsher, more erratic, casting sharp-edged shadows that dance with a frantic energy. He brings the match to the wick of the fresh candle, which stands like a white marble column on the desk. The wick catches instantly. It is a dry, thirsty cord that drinks the fire. A small blue bud of flame appears, growing steadily as it melts the surrounding tallow to create a new pool of fuel. Once the candle is established, the commander shakes the match, extinguishing it with a final, lingering trail of smoke. The room settles back into its familiar chiaroscuro. The new light is clean and bright, the tallow white and unscarred. The shadows retreat to their corners, resuming their patient vigil. The commander breathes a long, slow sigh of relief, his breath forming a fresh cloud of white vapor that drifts through the golden light. The continuity has been preserved. The vigil remains unbroken. The strategy by candlelight continues into its next phase, a new hour of endurance defined by the height of this fresh pillar of wax. He looks down at his coat, the heavy wool appearing even darker against the brilliance of the new flame. His gaze falls upon the metal buttons that run in a double line down his chest. They are made of dull brass, each one embossed with a crest that has been worn smooth by the friction of greatcoats and weather. In the light of the candle, each button becomes a tiny, golden mirror, reflecting a distorted version of the flame. He considers the history of these buttons, the way they were cast in a foundry miles away, the way they have been polished by orderlies who are now likely shivering in their own tents. They are symbols of rank, of order, and of the weight of the institution he serves. To him, however, they are simply weights, metal anchors that keep the heavy fabric of the coat pinned against his body. He feels the cold metal through the layers of cloth, a series of small, icy points pressing against his chest. The frost on the tent walls has evolved during the moments of darkness. The patterns have grown more complex, the dendritic structures branching out like the veins of a frozen leaf. In the vintage style of the drawing, these patterns are rendered with a sharp, silver-white pastel, creating a lace-like texture that contrasts with the deep blue of the canvas. The commander traces the growth of one such pattern with his eyes. It is a fractal geometry, a mathematical expression of the cold's desire for order. He finds a strange comfort in the precision of the ice. It is a reminder that even in the chaos of the winter, there are laws that must be obeyed. The ice does not grow randomly. It follows the path of least resistance, seeking out the microscopic fibers of the canvas and the moisture trapped within them. He sees the map of the campaign mirrored in the map of the frost, a series of inevitable movements dictated by the terrain and the temperature. He turns his attention back to the physical map on the desk. The fresh candlelight reveals details that had been lost in the dimming glow of the previous candle. He notices a small smudge of ink near a river crossing, a mark made perhaps by a staff officer weeks ago. It is a tiny, insignificant detail, but in the isolation of the tent, it takes on the importance of a landmark. He wonders who made the mark, what they were thinking, and where they are now. The army is a collection of thousands of such individuals, each a tiny smudge of ink on the vast, white parchment of the history of the world. He is the one tasked with making sense of these marks, with turning the chaos of individual lives into the order of a strategic movement. But tonight, there is no movement. There is only the preservation of the marks. The silence of the camp is absolute. It is a heavy, smothering silence that seems to emanate from the snow itself. He imagines the layers of white piling up outside, each flake a tiny weight that adds to the burden of the earth. The silence is not just the absence of noise. It is a physical barrier that prevents thought from traveling too far. It keeps his mind focused on the immediate, the desk, the candle, the map. He thinks about the logistics of the coming dawn. The need for firewood, the rationing of the hardtack, the health of the horses. These are the boring, essential details of command. A campaign is not one with brilliant maneuvers or heroic charges. It is one with the steady, repetitive management of survival. It is won by the man who can sit in a tent and wait for the ice to melt without losing his mind to the silence. The texture of the air in the tent has become almost granular. It feels as though the darkness is composed of fine, airborne silt that is settling over everything. This is reflected in the grainy texture of the pastel drawing, where the colors are not solid blocks but collections of tiny, vibrant dots. The commander feels this silt in his throat, a dry, dusty sensation that makes every breath a labor. He reaches for a ceramic mug that sits near the edge of the desk. It is empty, the tea he had hours ago now a frozen disk of brown ice at the bottom. He taps the side of the mug with a gloved finger, the sound a dull, hollow thud. The ceramic is cold, a dense material that has absorbed the night. He sets it back down, the movement creating a small, muffled sound on the wood of the desk. His mind drifts to the history of this region, a land that has seen 1,000 winters and 1,000 armies. He thinks of the ancient fortifications buried beneath the snow, the stone walls that have crumbled into the earth, the bones of soldiers who fell in wars that have long been forgotten. This valley is a graveyard of ambitions, a place where the geography itself resists the intrusion of men. The mountains do not care about the borders drawn on the map. The rivers do not care about the names given to them by kings. The winter is the only true sovereign of this land, and its laws are absolute. He is merely a tenant in this frozen kingdom, a temporary occupant of a canvas palace, waiting for his lease to expire. The visual composition of the tent is a study in verticality and weight. The heavy folds of the canvas, the solid pillar of the tent pole, the rigid posture of the commander, all of these elements create a sense of downward pressure. Even the light of the candle seems to be pulling toward the earth, the amber glow pooling on the desk like a liquid. The vintage style, with its soft edges and deep shadows, emphasizes this heaviness. It is a world where gravity is the primary force, where every object is being pulled into the frozen ground. The commander feels this gravity in his own limbs, a leaden sensation that makes even the smallest movement feel like a monumental effort. He embraces the weight. It is a form of stability, a way to anchor himself against the ephemeral nature of the wind. The wind has found a new way to interact with the tent. It is no longer a moan or a whistle, but a low-frequency thrumming that makes the entire structure vibrate. It is the sound of the atmosphere being pushed through a sieve, a turbulent, chaotic noise that contrasts with the stillness of the interior. The commander listens to the thrumming, feeling it in the wood of the chair and the floorboards. It is a reminder that the world is in motion, even if he is not. He imagines the clouds scudding across the moonless sky, the snow being whipped into white cyclones, the trees in the distant forest bowing under the weight of the gale. Out there, the winter is a wild, uncontrollable beast. In here, it is a disciplined, orderly presence, managed by the strategy of the candlelight. He looks at the quill again, the feather catching the light of the new candle. It is a pale, elegant shape against the dark wood of the desk. He thinks about the act of writing, the way a few drops of ink can command 1,000 men to move, to fight, to die. It is a terrifying power, a weight that he carries every time he picks up the pen. But tonight the pen is silent. There are no orders to write, no reports to file. The only communication is the steady, wordless dialogue between the commander and the cold. He is the witness to the winter, the one who records the silence in the ledger of his own endurance. The quill remains where it is, a part of the still life, its purpose suspended by the freeze. The smell of the new candle is slightly different from the old one. It has a fresher, more floral scent, perhaps a hint of lavender or beeswax that was added to the tallow. It is a brief, pleasant intrusion into the stagnant air of the room. The commander inhales the scent, allowing it to trigger a momentary memory of a garden in summer, of the warmth of the sun on his skin, of the sound of bees in the clover. The memory is sharp and vivid, a splash of bright color in the monochromatic world of the tent. Then it vanishes, replaced by the reality of the charcoal shadows and the indigo night. He does not mourn the loss of the memory. He simply acknowledges it as a part of the history of his thoughts. The winter has a way of stripping away the unnecessary, leaving only the essential core of the self. The texture of the map under his fingers is a constant source of sensory input. He can feel the grain of the parchment, the slight indentation where the ink has bitten into the paper, the rough edges where the sheet was cut. It is a physical reality that he can touch and hold. He traces the line of a ridge, his fingertip moving over the representation of the stone. He imagines the texture of the real ridge, the jagged rocks, the slick ice, the deep drifts of snow. In his mind, he is walking that ridge, his boots crunching on the frozen earth, the wind biting at his face. He is the master of the terrain, even if he is currently confined to a chair in a tent. The map is his gateway to the world, a portal through which he can project his consciousness into the frozen void. The candle gutters slightly, the flame dancing in a draft that has found its way through a seam in the canvas. The shadows on the wall react with a sudden, frantic motion, jumping and swirling like ink dropped into water. The commander does not move. He trusts the candle to recover. He trusts the tent to hold. He waits for the equilibrium to return. When it does, the room feels even quieter than before, as if the brief disruption has deepened the silence. He looks at the pool of melted wax at the base of the flame. It is a clear, golden liquid, a small lake of potential light. He watches a tiny speck of soot drift into the lake, where it is slowly absorbed by the viscous fluid. It is a small, insignificant event, a footnote in the history of the night. The visual style of the scene is now fully integrated with the narrative. The vintage-colored pencil and soft pastel drawings on the dark surface have created a world that is both beautiful and oppressive. The deep blue and gray tones are the dominant forces, with the warm lantern light acting as a fragile, precious exception. The commander is a figure drawn into this world, his lines merging with the shadows, his form defined by the light. He is a part of the composition, a necessary element in the study of stillness. Every detail, the texture of the wool, the grain of the wood, the sparkle of the frost, contributes to the overall sense of a moment frozen in time. The night is a long, slow process of cooling. He can feel the heat leaving the tent, escaping through the canvas and into the hungry air outside. He can feel the heat leaving his own body, radiating out through his coat and into the room. He is a heat source in a world of absolute zero, a small biological fire that is slowly burning itself out. He does not fear the cold, he respects it. It is the ultimate strategist, a force that wins by attrition, by waiting, by simply being. He adjusts his position in the chair, the wood creaking in protest. The sound is a reminder of his own physicality, of the fact that he is still alive, still breathing, still commanding. He looks at the clock on the desk. The hands have moved another few degrees, marking the passage of the hour. The tick-tick-tick of the mechanism is a dry, metallic sound that feels increasingly alien in the organic silence of the winter. He finds himself resenting the clock for its insistence on a linear progression of time. In this tent, time is circular, a repetitive cycle of breath and flame and frost. The clock belongs to a world of trains and schedules and appointments. Here there is only the vigil. He turns the clock face down on the desk, silencing its visual reminder of the world outside. The sound remains, but it is now muffled, a distant heartbeat that he can choose to ignore. The strategy by Candlelight is a strategy of the interior. It is about maintaining the integrity of the self in the face of the vast external void. It is about keeping the light burning, not because it will change the outcome of the campaign, but because it is the duty of the commander to do so. He sits at his desk, a figure of charcoal and wool, watching the flame. He is the anchor of the camp, the point of consciousness that prevents the entire army from disappearing into the white silence. He will remain in his chair, his hands on the map, his gaze on the candle until the dawn arrives to claim the world. And even then, he will remain, for the winter is long and the strategy of endurance is never truly finished. The light of the candle reaches the edge of a stack of old reports, the paper yellowed and brittle. He looks at the titles, written in a cramped official hand. Logistics of the 3rd Regiment, Forage Assessment, Sector 4, Monthly Mortality Rate, Winter Quarter. These are the documents of a dying army, the records of a slow, cold attrition. He does not need to read them, he knows their contents by heart. They are stories of horses lost to the ice, of men lost to the fever, of wagons lost to the mud. They are the boring, tragic history of the campaign. He sets a heavy brass paperweight on top of the stack, a solid, unmoving object that pins the history to the desk. The weight is cold to the touch, a dense piece of metal that reflects the candlelight with a dull, golden sheen. The texture of the night is now one of absolute permanence. It feels as though the sun will never return, as though the world has been permanently encased in this shell of indigo and frost. The commander accepts this possibility with a calm, stoic indifference. If this is the end of the world, then he will meet it at his desk, with his map and his candle. He is the strategist of the end times, the man who ensures that the final moments are conducted with order and dignity. He looks at the flame, seeing in its steady burn a reflection of his own resolve. He is the light in the dark. He is the heat in the cold. He is the commander. The new candle stands tall, a pristine column of ivory wax that represents the next measure of the night's endurance. Its flame is a sharp, vibrant teardrop of orange and gold, casting a fresh wave of light across the scarred surface of the oak desk. In the vintage drawing of this moment, the light is rendered with thick, intentional applications of pale yellow pastel, layered over the deep charcoal of the background to create a sense of physical volume. The light does not simply illuminate. It pushes back against the indigo atmosphere, carving out a sanctuary of visibility in a world that has been largely erased by the dark. The commander watches as the first bead of liquid wax forms at the base of the wick, a clear, shimmering jewel that begins its slow, gravitational journey toward the edge of the candle's rim. This movement is the only clock that matters now, the slow, viscous progression of the melt, the quiet transformation of solid fuel into light and heat. He feels the warmth of the flame on the exposed skin of his forehead, a faint, localized sensation that stands in stark contrast to the numbing chill that has claimed the rest of his body. The silence of the tent has deepened, if such a thing is possible. It is a silence that has mass, a silence that feels like the heavy, matted fur of the rugs that line the floorboards. In this stillness, the sounds of the natural world are amplified until they become tectonic events. The soft, rhythmic thump of a clump of snow sliding off the exterior canvas of the tent. The sharp, crystalline crack of a timber in the desk contracting as the frost reaches its core. The distant, mournful lowing of a draft ox in the baggage train, a sound so lonely it seems to encapsulate the entire tragedy of the winter. These noises do not break the stillness. They are absorbed by it, becoming part of the textured landscape of the night. The commander listens to these sounds with a detached, clinical interest, as if he is documenting the slow death of the world. He is the chronicler of the freeze, the one who remains conscious when all other life has sought the oblivion of sleep. His hands, clad in their heavy, oil-tanned leather gloves, remain resting upon the map. The texture of the leather is a study in wear and age, a network of fine lines and deep furrows that look like a drawing of a dry riverbed. In the low light, the gloves appear as part of the desk itself, two dark, stationary objects that possess no more life than the brass weights or the inkwell. He can no longer feel the individual fingers. They have become a singular, heavy weight at the end of his arms. This loss of sensation is not a cause for alarm, but a sign of successful adaptation. To feel the cold is to suffer. To become the cold is to endure. He has reached a state of mineral calm, a plateau of existence where the needs of the flesh are secondary to the requirements of the strategy. The strategy, however, is not a plan for action, but a plan for stasis. It is the art of remaining unchanged while the environment seeks to break you down. The map is a masterpiece of charcoal and ink, its lines rendered with a precision that seems impossible in such dim light. He traces the path of a mountain range that runs along the northern border of the territory. In the drawing, these mountains are represented by heavy, diagonal strokes of gray pastel, their peaks left as the raw, dark blue of the paper to suggest the presence of eternal ice. He imagines the wind screaming across those high ridges, the snow being carved into jagged sculptures by the gale. He thinks of the outposts he has stationed there, small, isolated clusters of men huddled in stone huts, their lives measured by the remaining length of their firewood. He feels a distant, ghostly pang of responsibility for them, a weight that is mirrored by the heavy wool of his coat. They are the far-flung nerve endings of his command, and tonight, those endings are being frozen one by one. The visual atmosphere of the tent is dominated by the grain of the dark surface on which the scene is rendered. This grain gives the shadows a vibrating, unstable quality, as if the darkness is composed of millions of tiny, moving particles. The commander's shadow on the rear wall is a colossal, shifting form, its edges blurred by the flickering of the candle. It looks like a figure carved from smoke, a dark god of the winter that watches over the man at the desk. The shadow does not follow the commander's subtle movements with perfect accuracy. It seems to have its own rhythm, a slow, pendulous sway that mimics the movement of the unlit lantern hanging from the center pole. This creates a sense of duality, as if there are two commanders in the tent, the one of flesh and wool, and the one of shadow and indigo. The smell of the room has shifted once again, the acrid scent of the match having been replaced by the rich, fatty aroma of the fresh tallow. There is also a hint of something metallic, perhaps the scent of the frozen ink or the brass of the telescope. It is a dry, sterile smell, the scent of an environment that has been stripped of its biological vitality. He inhales deeply, the cold air stinging the back of his throat, and feels the stagnation of the tent filling his lungs. There is no oxygen here that has not been breathed before, no air that has not been touched by the flame or the frost. It is a closed system, a microcosm of the campaign itself, where the resources are finite and the environment is hostile. He finds a certain purity in this isolation. There are no distractions here, no voices to contradict his thoughts, no sunlight to illuminate the grim reality of the camp. He looks at the water basin in the corner. The ice has grown thicker since he last checked, the dendritic patterns now covering the entire surface in a complex, overlapping weave of silver and glass. The ice is not clear. It is clouded with trapped air bubbles and impurities, giving it a milky, opalescent quality in the candlelight. It looks like a fallen moon, a cold, glowing disk that rests in the shadows. He thinks about the act of breaking the ice, the sharp, splintering sound it would make, the sudden revelation of the dark water beneath. But he does not move. The ice is a record of the night's progress, a physical manifestation of the passage of time. To break it would be to interrupt the natural history of the freeze. He prefers to let it grow, to let the cold complete its work until the basin is a solid, unyielding block. The texture of the air seems to have thickened even further, becoming a palpable substance that resists his movements. It is as if he is sitting at the bottom of a deep, frozen ocean, the weight of the atmosphere pressing down on him with a silent, crushing force. This sensation is captured in the vintage style of the drawing through the use of heavy, horizontal shading in the background, which creates a sense of atmospheric density. The commander is a part of this density, his form defined more by what is missing from the shadows than by the light itself. He is a study in negative space, a figure of charcoal and slate who exists only because the light of the candle has granted him a temporary reprieve from the void. His thoughts drift to the concept of the long winter. In the histories he has read, there are accounts of seasons that lasted for years, of suns that grew dim and empires that vanished beneath the ice. He wonders if this is the beginning of such a time. The current freeze feels different from the winters of his youth. It is more intentional, more malevolent. It is not merely a change in weather. It is a fundamental shift in the state of the world. The strategy by Candlelight is his attempt to maintain the old world, the world of maps and orders and hierarchies, in the face of this new, entropic reality. He is the last defender of the autumn, sitting in a canvas fortress and waiting for a spring that may never arrive. Outside, the wind begins a new cycle of movement. It starts as a low, mournful sigh that seems to come from the very earth itself, then rises into a sustained, vibrating hum. The tent reacts with a series of rhythmic snaps and groans, the canvas undulating like the skin of a great beast. The commander feels the vibration in the chair, a subtle, high-frequency tremor that travels through his spine and into his skull. It is the voice of the storm, a language of pressure and temperature that he has learned to interpret with the instinct of a seasoned sailor. The wind is telling him that the pressure is dropping, that the cold is intensifying, and that the snow will not stop for days. He accepts this information with a grim, silent nod. It does not change the strategy. It only increases the importance of the endurance. The visual style of the scene is now fully realized in its vintage, hand-drawn aesthetic. The use of colored pencils to create the fine details of the map and the texture of the wool gives the image a sense of tactile reality, while the soft pastels of the background provide a dreamlike, hypnotic atmosphere. The color palette is strictly limited to shades of indigo, charcoal, slate, and the warm amber of the candle. There are no bright colors here, no distractions for the eye. The focus is entirely on the interplay of light and shadow, on the struggle of the flame to maintain its presence in the ocean of dark. The drawing feels like a relic from another age, a piece of forgotten history that has been preserved in a dusty portfolio. He looks at the quill pen once again. It is a fragile, organic object in a world that is becoming increasingly inorganic. He imagines the bird it came from, a creature of flight and warmth, now likely a frozen husk in some distant forest. The quill is a reminder of the fragility of life, of the ease with which the cold can extinguish the spark of vitality. He picks up the pen, feeling its lightness in his gloved hand. It feels like nothing, a ghost of a tool. He dips the nib into the inkwell, which has become a thick, tar-like sludge. He tries to write a single word on the corner of the map, but the ink is too cold to flow. It leaves only a faint, gray scratch on the parchment, a mark that is more of a scar than a letter. He sets the pen down, the failure of the ink a confirmation of the knight's victory. The world is no longer interested in words. The smell of the candle is now so pervasive that he can no longer distinguish it from his own breath. It has become the ambient scent of his existence. He finds himself staring into the center of the flame, his eyes following the subtle movements of the fire. The flame is not a single thing. It is a process of consumption and release. He sees the blue heart of the fire, the yellow mantle, and the orange crown. He sees the way it reacts to the microscopic drafts in the tent, bowing and flickering with a grace that seems almost sentient. The flame is his only companion, the only other thing in the room that is actively resisting the freeze. He feels a profound sense of kinship with the fire, a shared destiny of burning until the fuel is gone. His gaze drifts to the heavy brass telescope that sits on a tripod near the tent entry. It is a long, cold cylinder of metal, its lenses currently clouded with frost. He imagines taking it outside and pointing it at the stars, if the stars were visible through the clouds. He wonders what he would see. If the heavens themselves are freezing, if the planets are slowing in their orbits, if the light of distant suns is being dimmed by the same indigo void that has swallowed the valley. The telescope is a tool for looking at the infinite, but tonight the infinite has come to him. It is here, in the tent, in the shadows that cling to the canvas and the cold that seeps through the floorboards. He does not need the telescope to see the end of the world. He only needs to sit at his desk and wait. The texture of the air is now so dense that the light of the candle seems to struggle to penetrate it. The amber glow is confined to a tight circle around the desk, beyond which the darkness is absolute. This is reflected in the drawing through the use of a sharp, circular vignette, where the details of the room fade into a granular, charcoal blackness. The commander is at the center of this circle, a solitary island of light in a sea of shadow. He feels the isolation of his position, the way the silence has cut him off from the rest of the army and the rest of humanity. He is a lighthouse keeper on a coast of ice, tending a flame that no one will ever see. He looks at the clock on the desk. He has turned it face down, but he can still hear the muffled tick-tick-tick of the mechanism against the wood. It is a frantic, desperate sound, a mechanical heart trying to keep pace with a world that has slowed to a crawl. He finds the sound increasingly irritating, a rhythmic intrusion into the purity of the silence. He reaches out and slides the clock toward the edge of the desk, moving it further away from his field of hearing. The The sound fades, becoming a distant, unimportant detail. He prefers the measurement of the candle, the organic, silent progression of the melt. The candle does not tick, it simply is. The night is a series of layers, each one colder and darker than the last. He can feel the layers accumulating, pressing down on the tent and the camp. He thinks about the morning, about the pale, gray light that will eventually filter through the canvas. It will not be a victory, only a change in the quality of the endurance. The sun will provide no warmth, only a more clear view of the desolation. The strategy will remain the same. The maps will remain the same. The cold will remain the same. He accepts this with a calm, stoic resignation. He is not looking for a resolution. He is looking for the strength to continue the vigil. The visual style of the drawing captures this sense of eternity through its composition. The lines of the tent poles and the desk create a rigid, unchanging frame, while the soft, smudged pastels of the shadows suggest a world that is fluid and unformed. The commander is the only point of focus, a figure of sharp lines and deep shading who anchors the entire image. Every detail, the fraying thread of a seam, the grain of the wood, the glint of the brass, is a testament to the artist's commitment to the study of stillness. It is a drawing that invites the viewer to stay, to linger in the cold, and to experience the slow, heavy passage of the night. The commander's shadow on the wall has become more stable as the candle flame has settled. It is now a dark, sharp silhouette, a mirror image of his own immobility. He looks at the shadow, seeing in it the archetype of the leader, the man who stands alone against the dark. He wonders if the shadow feels the cold, if it experiences the same numbness and fatigue that he does. Or perhaps the shadow is the true self, the part of him that is immune to the elements, the part that will remain long after the flesh has failed. He finds comfort in the idea of the shadow self, a silent, indestructible guardian that will continue the strategy even after the candle has gone out. The smell of the tent is now punctuated by the scent of old paper and dry ink, a dusty, archival aroma that suggests the weight of history. He thinks of all the reports he has read, all the accounts of previous winters and previous wars. They are all here in the tent, part of the atmosphere he breathes. He is not just a man in a tent. He is a part of a long, unbroken chain of command that stretches back into the mists of time. This sense of continuity is what sustains him. He is not alone. He is supported by the ghosts of all those who came before him, all those who sat at desks in the dark and waited for the dawn. The strategy by candlelight is their legacy, and he is its current steward. The texture of the wool coat against his chin is a grounding sensation, a reminder of his own physical presence. It is a coarse, honest fabric made from the fleeces of sheep that have known the same cold. He feels the lanolin in the wool, a faint, oily residue that has protected the animals and now protects him. He appreciates the simplicity of the material, its stubborn resistance to the wind and the damp. It is a humble shield, but it is enough. He pulls the collar tighter, the movement creating a soft, rustling sound that is the only communication he has with the world. The night continues its slow, hypnotic descent into the absolute. The candle is now a third of the way through its life, its flame a steady, silent witness to the stillness of the room. The commander sits, a figure of charcoal and pastel, watching the light. The strategy is endurance. The history is the freeze. The world is a vintage drawing on a dark surface, a study in the beauty and the terror of the winter night. He will remain. He will watch. He will wait. The second candle has reached its midpoint, a milestone in the silent history of the night that is marked only by the shifting geometry of the wax. The flame now sits deeper within its translucent chimney, the glow it emits becoming softer and more diffused as it passes through the thick, amber-colored walls of the tallow. In the vintage drawing that defines this reality, the light is no longer a sharp point of brilliance. It has become a luminous fog, a warm haze that struggles to push past the heavy, charcoal blue atmosphere of the tent. The shadows have responded by softening their edges, the deep indigos and violets blending into the grainy texture of the dark paper surface. The desk is a landscape of half-light, where the boundaries between the wood, the map, and the leather-clad hands of the commander are becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish. Everything is surrendering to the gloom, a slow, inevitable merger of matter and shadow. The commander does not resist this process. He observes it with the patient, unblinking gaze of a man who has made peace with the erasure of the world. The cold has reached a level of intensity that is no longer merely a temperature, but a physical state of being. It has permeated the layers of the tent, the thickness of the wool, and the depth of the bone. It is a dry, desiccating cold that seeks to extract every last molecule of moisture from the air, leaving only a brittle, crystalline void. The commander can feel the way the air resists being drawn into his lungs, its density making every breath a deliberate, heavy exertion. The vapor of his breath is now a constant, thick plume of white pastel, rising in slow, undulating curves before being swallowed by the darkness above. He watches these clouds of warmth as they depart his body, seeing them as small, transient offerings to the winter. He is slowly emptying himself into the night, his internal heat being traded for the preservation of the silence. His focus drifts to the brass telescope, which stands on its tripod like a skeletal observer near the tent's entry. The metal is completely obscured by a thick layer of rime ice, the crystals having grown into long, delicate needles that give the instrument a fur-like appearance. In the vintage style of the drawing, these crystals are rendered with a sharp, silver-white pencil, each one a minute, horizontal stroke that catches the faint, ambient light. The lens of the telescope is a solid disk of white frost, a blind eye that no longer seeks the horizon. The commander considers the purpose of the telescope, to bring the distant near, to make the invisible visible. In the current state of the world, such a tool is obsolete. There is no distance left. The world has contracted to the space within the canvas walls. The horizon has been replaced by the shadows, and the stars have been replaced by the flickering flame. The telescope is merely a sculpture of metal and ice, a monument to a curiosity that has been frozen into a state of indifference. The map beneath his hands has begun to feel like a topographical reality, the ridges of the parchment mimicking the mountains it depicts. He traces a line of a frozen river, his gloved finger moving with the sluggishness of the water itself. He imagines the ice on that river, the deep, Prussian blue of the frozen depths, the white, fractured surface where the current has been trapped in mid-motion. He thinks about the fish beneath the ice, suspended in a state of near animation, their hearts beating once every few minutes. He feels a kinship with them. He, too, is suspended in the deep, cold current of the night, his vital functions slowed to the minimum required for survival. The strategy is to wait for the thaw, to remain intact until the flow of time resumes its normal pace. But for now, time is a frozen river, and he is a creature trapped in its depths. The silence of the tent is a thick, textured garment that he wears over his coat. It is a silence that is built from the absence of life, the absence of movement, and the absence of light. Within this silence, the sound of the wind has become a fundamental constant, a background radiation of the winter. It is a low-pitched, vibrating drone that seems to originate from the center of the earth. It does not speak of storms or weather, it speaks of the void. The commander listens to the wind, letting its rhythm dictate the pace of his thoughts. He is no longer thinking in words but in textures and tones. The blue of the shadows, the grain of the wood, the weight of the wool, the smell of the wax. These are the components of his strategy, the variables in an equation that has no solution other than endurance. The visual style of the scene is now fully dominated by the chiaroscuro of the deep night. The artist has used a heavy hand with the charcoal, building up layers of dark pigment until the paper surface is saturated and deep. Against this obsidian background, the light of the candle is a fragile, precious anomaly. The warm yellows and oranges are applied sparingly, highlighting only the most essential details. The curve of the commander's shoulder, the edge of a brass weight, the white crest of a wave of paper. This creates a sense of profound isolation, as if the desk and the man are the only things that have been granted the right to exist. The rest of the world has been smudged away, a victim of the artist's thumb and the winter's indifference. He looks at the silver flask that sits in the far corner of the desk. The glint it catches is now a dull, reddish amber, reflected from the lower part of the flame. He considers the liquid inside, the sharp, burning heat of the spirit that could momentarily cut through the numbness. But he does not reach for it. To introduce artificial heat is to disrupt the equilibrium he has worked so hard to establish. He wants to know the cold, to experience it in its purest form. He wants to understand the strategy of the ice, the way it conquers without a single blow by simply refusing to yield. The flask remains a distant, shiny object in the periphery of his vision, a relic of a world that values comfort over truth. He prefers the truth of the candle and the map. The smell of the tent is now a complex weave of odors that have been compressed by the pressure of the atmosphere. There is the persistent, fatty scent of the tallow, the dry, metallic scent of the frost, and the faint, earthy scent of the frozen floorboards. But there is also something else, the scent of time itself. It is a dusty, ancient smell, like the air in a tomb that has not been opened for centuries. It is the smell of a world that has stopped moving, where the past and the present have merged into a single, unchanging moment. The commander breathes in this scent, feeling it settle in his lungs like a layer of fine, gray silt. He is becoming a part of this ancient air, a part of the history that is being written in the frost and the shadows. The texture of the air in the tent has become almost liquid. It feels as though he is submerged in a cold, dense fluid that dampens sound and slows movement. This is reflected in the way the candlelight behaves. It does not radiate so much as it seeps, the glow clinging to the surfaces it touches like a warm oil. The commander moves his hand across the map, and the movement creates a slow-motion ripple in the air, a distortion of the light that takes seconds to settle. He is fascinated by this fluid quality of the environment. It suggests that the world is not solid, but a collection of states that can be changed by the application of cold and silence. He is the master of this fluid world, the one who understands its currents and its depths. Outside, the wind begins to perform a new melody against the canvas. It is a high-pitched, whistling sound that occurs when the air is forced through the minute gaps in the tent's seams. It sounds like a chorus of distant flutes, playing a discordant, mournful song. The sound rises and falls with the pressure of the gale, a musical representation of the storm's energy. The commander listens to the flutes of the wind, finding a strange beauty in their dissonance. It is a song that has no lyrics, no meaning other than its own existence. It is the music of the void, and he is the only audience member in the valley. He acknowledges the performance with a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of respect for the power of the elements. The visual composition of the room is a study in weight and balance. The heavy, dark mass of the commander is balanced by the light, airy presence of the candle. The horizontal line of the desk is balanced by the vertical line of the tent pole. The intricate details of the frost are balanced by the vast, empty spaces of the shadows. This balance creates a sense of permanence, a world that is held in place by its own internal logic. The vintage style, with its rough textures and soft colors, emphasizes the handmade quality of this world. It is a world that has been drawn with care and attention, where every stroke of the pencil is a testament to the endurance of the subject. The commander is the anchor of this composition, the point around which everything else turns. He turns his attention back to the inkwell. The bubble that had been trapped on the surface has finally burst, leaving a tiny, jagged ring in the viscous fluid. He looks at the ring, seeing in it the aftermath of a microscopic event. In the context of the night, this is a major development, a change that has occurred over the course of hours. He finds a deep satisfaction in this slow pace of change. It is a world where every action matters, where every movement is recorded in the physical state of the objects. He picks up the quill pen and touches the tip to the ring in the ink. The ink is now so thick that it clings to the nib like tar, refusing to drip. He makes a single, deliberate mark on a scrap of parchment, a black dot that represents the current moment in time. The dot is thick and raised, a tactile record of his presence. The smell of the candle is now so strong that it has become a taste, a heavy, waxy flavor on the back of his tongue. He does not find it unpleasant. It is the flavor of the vigil. It is the taste of the energy that is being consumed to keep the darkness at bay. He finds himself breathing in synchronization with the flicker of the flame, his own life force rising and falling with the movement of the fire. This biological entrainment is a key part of his strategy. By aligning himself with the candle, he reduces the friction between his body and the environment. He becomes a part of the flame cycle, a participant in the slow, orderly destruction of the wax. He is the observer and the observed, the burner and the burned. The texture of the wool coat against his chin has become more pronounced, as the moisture from his breath has frozen into a fine mist of ice on the fibers. He can feel the individual crystals of frost as they brush against his skin, each one a tiny, cold needle. The sensation is grounding, a reminder of the boundary between himself and the world. He is a warm core in a cold shell, a living being encased in layers of dead wool and frozen air. This duality is the essence of his existence. He is a contradiction, a point of heat in an ocean of zero. He embraces the contradiction, for it is the only thing that allows him to remain. The visual style of the drawing captures this duality through the use of contrasting textures. The smooth, liquid appearance of the candle wax contrasts with the rough, grainy appearance of the charcoal shadows. The sharp, precise lines of the map contrast with the soft, smudged lines of the vapor. The commander is the point where these textures meet. His form a combination of the sharp and the soft, the solid and the fluid. The artist has captured this by using a variety of techniques, cross-hatching, blending, stippling, to create a figure that is as complex as the environment he inhabits. He is a masterpiece of the vintage aesthetic, a figure that is both real and mythological. He looks at the map again, focusing on a region that is marked as uncharted. In the drawing, this area is a blank space of dark blue paper with no ink lines or pastel shading. He finds himself drawn to this emptiness. It represents the ultimate conclusion of the winter, a world where all the maps have been erased, where all the boundaries have been dissolved, and where only the void remains. He considers the possibility that he is currently sitting in that uncharted territory, that the tent and the desk and the candle are merely illusions that he has created to maintain his sanity. Perhaps the winter has already won, and he is simply the last person to realize it. He accepts this thought with a calm, stoic indifference. Whether the world is real or an illusion, the strategy remains the same: endure. The darkness in the corners of the tent has begun to feel more active, as if the shadows are slowly reaching toward the center of the room. He can see the way they lurch and crawl with the flickering of the candle, a silent, nocturnal life form that thrives in the absence of light. He does not fear the shadows, he respects them. They are the natural state of the world, the foundation upon which the light is built. He watches as a shadow from a supply chest creeps across the floorboards, its edge moving a fraction of an inch every few minutes. It is a slow, patient movement, a reminder that the dark has all the time in the world. The commander is a temporary occupant of this space, a transient light in an eternal shadow. He honors the shadows by allowing them to exist, by not seeking to illuminate every corner of his world. The sound of the wind has settled into a steady, resonant thrumming that makes the wood of the desk vibrate. He can feel the vibration in his hands, a subtle, high-frequency hum that travels through the leather of his gloves and into his bones. It is the heartbeat of the storm, a rhythmic expression of the energy that is moving outside. He finds the vibration soothing, a physical manifestation of the world's vitality. Even in the freeze, there is power. Even in the silence, there is a voice. He lets the vibration fill his body, feeling it synchronize with his own pulse. He is becoming a part of the storm, a part of the energy that is vibrating through the valley. He is the still point at the center of the vibration, the axis upon which the storm turns. The visual texture of the air seems to have become more granular, as if the darkness is composed of fine, airborne silt. This is reflected in the grainy texture of the pastel drawing, where the colors are built up from millions of tiny, vibrant dots. The commander feels this silt in his throat, a dry, dusty sensation that makes every breath a labor. He imagines the air as a fine powder, a pulverized version of the landscape outside, filling the tent and coating everything in a layer of gray. This powder is the medium of his thoughts, the substance through which he must navigate his strategy. Everything is heavy, everything is slow, everything is cold. He feels the weight of his own eyelids, the effort required to keep them open. He does not want to sleep, he wants to witness. He wants to be the one who sees the night through to its end, the one who does not blink in the face of the dark. The rime ice on the brass rivets of the field chest has grown even further. The tiny, needle-like crystals have extended their reach, forming a delicate, jagged fringe along the edge of the metal. In the vintage drawing, these crystals are rendered with a sharp white pencil, each 1 minute precise stroke of light. They look like frozen electricity, a static discharge of the cold. The commander watches the ice, fascinated by its slow, crystalline growth. It is a form of life, he thinks, a cold, mineral life that thrives in the absence of heat. He feels a sense of kinship with the ice. He, too, is a crystalline structure, a rigid, orderly thing that has been built up by the cold. The smell of the wax is stronger now, a thick, cloying scent that fills his nostrils and clings to the back of his throat. It is the smell of survival, the smell of the human effort to maintain a light in the wilderness. He finds himself breathing in time with the flickering of the flame, a synchronized existence that is both hypnotic and draining. His heart beats with a slow, heavy rhythm, a muffled sound that seems to come from deep within the earth. He is the heart of the camp, the steady pulse that keeps the organism alive through the long, frozen night. The visual composition of the room is a study in stillness. The lines are horizontal and vertical, with no diagonal movements to suggest action or excitement. The commander is a vertical line. The desk is a horizontal line. The tent pole is a vertical line. This geometry creates a sense of stability and permanence, a world that is held in place by its own weight. The vintage quality of the drawing, the grain of the paper, the softness of the pastels, gives the scene a sense of history, as if it is a memory that has been preserved in a dusty archive. It is a story that has already been told, a night that has already been endured. He turns his gaze back to the map. A small, dark shape caught in the fold of the parchment catches his eye. It is a dried leaf, perhaps brought in by the wind weeks ago or carried from a southern forest in the pocket of a soldier. It is a brittle brown thing, its veins visible like a skeletal hand. In the candlelight, it looks like a piece of ancient manuscript, a fragment of a lost world. The commander touches the leaf, his gloved finger making a soft, crunching sound. The leaf shatters into a dozen tiny pieces, becoming part of the dust that coats the desk. It is a reminder of the fragility of the living, of the ease with which the cold can break the structures of the past. The wind outside changes its tone, rising to a higher, more piercing note. It sounds like a flute played by a giant, a single sustained melody that speaks of loneliness and ice. The tent ropes strain and groan, the canvas snapping with the sound of a pistol shot. The commander does not flinch. He has heard the voice of the wind many times, and he knows that it is merely air moving from one void to another. He waits for the gust to pass, for the silence to return. When it does, the quiet feels deeper, more profound, as if the wind has sucked the last remaining sounds out of the world. He looks at the candle. It is at the halfway point. The flame is a steady, silent witness to the stillness of the room. The commander sits, a figure of charcoal and pastel, watching the light. The strategy is endurance. The history is the freeze. The world is a vintage drawing on a dark surface, a study in the beauty and the terror of the winter night. He will remain. He will watch. He will wait. The night is far from over, and the story of the ice has only just begun to reach its core. The candle has begun its final descent into the hollow of its brass holder, the second pillar of light, now shorter than the span of a man's palm. The wick is long and curved, a charred hook of carbon that glows with a faint, embers red at its tip, supporting a flame that has grown wider and more tranquil. The pool of melted tallow is deep now, a translucent lake of liquid gold that ripples almost imperceptibly with the slow, rhythmic vibration of the wind against the canvas. In the vintage drawing of this hour, the light is rendered with a heavy, waxy pressure of the pastel, creating a saturated glow that feels as though it could be scraped off the dark paper with a fingernail. The edges of the desk, once sharp and defined, are now being reclaimed by the deep, grainy blue of the periphery. The shadows are no longer just absences of light. They are heavy, material entities that seem to occupy the space with the same authority as the furniture itself. The commander remains motionless, his chin tucked slightly into the fur of his collar, his breath appearing like a slow-moving ghost in the amber air. Each exhale is a deliberate release, a rhythmic white smudge of pastel cloud that rises, lingers, and dissolves into the charcoal peak of the tent. The silence has attained a quality of absolute density, a weight that presses against the eardrums with a low, constant hum. Within this silence, the sound of the world's slow death by frost is the only narrative. He hears the microscopic snapping of individual fibers in the tent ropes, the hemp contracting under the mounting tension of the sub-zero air. He hears the wood of the tent pole groaning, a long, drawn-out creak that sounds like a ship's hull under the pressure of the deep sea. These are not sudden noises, but the slow vocabulary of the freeze, a language that speaks of structural fatigue and the relentless grip of the winter. To the commander, these sounds are reassuring. They are the sounds of things holding on. As long as the wood groans and the rope snaps, the shelter remains. He listens to the percussion of the ice crystals hitting the canvas, a dry, metallic clicking that sounds like the falling of 1 billion tiny needles. It is the sound of the valley being buried, one grain of frozen dust at a time. His hands, still resting on the map, have long since lost the sensation of being flesh. They are heavy, cold appendages, their texture indistinguishable from the leather of the gloves or the grain of the parchment. He looks at his right hand, seeing the way the candlelight catches the brass rivets on the glove's cuff. In the drawing, these rivets are tiny points of sharp white light, isolated against the deep indigo shading of the leather. He considers the strategy of the hand, the way it holds the power to move armies, to sign death warrants, to chart the course of empires. Tonight, the hand is a monument to stillness. Its only duty is to remain exactly where it is, an anchor for the map and a witness to the vigil. The leather is covered in a fine layer of dust and frost, a patina of age that has accumulated over the hours. He does not brush it away. The dust is part of the composition, a record of the night's stasis. The map itself has become a terrain of shadows and ridges. In the low light of the dying second candle, the ink lines have taken on a three-dimensional quality, as if they were actual mountains and rivers rising from the paper. He traces the contour of a great forest to the south, a region rendered in the drawing with thousands of tiny, vertical charcoal marks. He imagines the trees there, great pines and oaks, their branches bowed to the breaking point under the weight of the snow. He imagines the silence of the forest floor, where the tracks of wolves and deer have been filled in by the drifting white. This is the world he is supposedly commanding, yet in this moment, the forest is more real to him as a texture on paper than as a physical place. The strategy is to bridge the gap between the representation and the reality, to maintain a connection to a world that has been swallowed by the dark. He is the cartographer of the void, keeping the names and places alive in the sanctuary of his own mind. The visual atmosphere of the tent has reached its most extreme state of chiaroscuro. The artist has used the dark surface of the paper to its full advantage, allowing the deep blue-gray of the background to provide the majority of the shading. The light is a fragile, central event, a soft amber sphere that barely reaches the edges of the desk. Beyond the light, the objects are suggested rather than seen. The silhouette of the heavy campaign chest is a dark, rectangular mass, its brass lock catching a single, faint glint. The sleeping cot is a mound of indigo shadows, its textures of wool and fur suggested by the rough tooth of the paper. The commander sits in the very center of this play of light and shadow, his form a masterclass in tonal control. The highlights on his brow and nose are sharp and bright, while the rest of his face is lost in a soft, smudged darkness that suggests a profound, bone-deep weariness. The smell of the room is a dense, cold mixture of tallow, old leather, and the scent of iron. The iron smell comes from the heavy wood-burning stove in the corner, which has long since gone cold, its metal body now a radiator of the freeze. The absence of heat from the stove has a scent of its own, a sharp, metallic dryness that cuts through the fatty smell of the wax. The commander inhales this air, feeling it expand in his chest like a cold weight. He is becoming a part of this scent, a part of the dry, frozen atmosphere of the room. There is no moisture left in the air. It has all been sequestered by the frost on the walls and the ice in the water basin. He feels his skin tightening, the cold drawing the last remnants of heat from his pores. He welcomes the sensation. It is a refinement of the self, a stripping away of the soft and the temporary to reveal the hard, enduring core beneath. His mind drifts to the logistical reports he studied earlier in the night. He remembers the numbers, the boring, repetitive columns of figures that represent the lifeblood of the army. 30,000 rations of hardtack, 400 sacks of oats, 12 cases of lamp oil, 6 miles of woolen cloth. These numbers are the true strategy. A campaign is not won by the brilliance of a general's mind, but by the weight of the supplies he can move across the ice. He thinks about the men who are responsible for these numbers, the clerks in their cold offices, the teamsters on the frozen roads, the quartermasters in their dark warehouses. They are all parts of the same machine of endurance, all working to keep the cold at bay for one more day. He is the one who gives these numbers meaning, the one who turns the oats and the oil into a force of history. But tonight, the history is stalled. The machine has stopped. The numbers are just ink on paper, as still and cold as the commander himself. The visual texture of the tent canvas is a constant source of sensory input. In the dying light of the second candle, the weave of the fabric looks like a vast, gray net that has been cast over the world. He can see the individual threads, the rough hemp fibers that have been woven together to create this shield. There are places where the fabric is thin, where the light of the moon, hidden behind the clouds, seems to create a faint, ghost-like luminescence on the outer surface. This creates a double-layered lighting effect, the warm amber from within and the cold, flat gray from without. The commander is caught between these two lights, a figure in a translucent shell. He considers the fragility of the canvas. It is only a few millimeters of fabric, yet it is the difference between life and the void. He feels a deep, quiet respect for the material, for its stubbornness, for its refusal to yield to the pressure of the wind. Outside, the wind has changed its voice once again. It is no longer a whistle or a moan, but a low-pitched, resonant thrumming, as if the entire valley is being played like a cello. This sound is caused by the air moving over the ridges and gullies of the mountains, a geological music that speaks of immense power and infinite patience. The sound vibrates through the floorboards of the tent, a subtle, high-frequency tremor that the commander feels in the soles of his boots. He lets the vibration travel up through his legs and into his spine, feeling himself synchronize with the rhythm of the earth. He is no longer an intruder in this landscape. He is a part of it. He is a stone sitting at a desk. He is a mountain wrapped in wool. He is the winter itself, watching the light. The rime ice on the telescope has grown into an intricate crystalline forest. The needles of frost are longer now, some of them an inch in length, branching out in delicate fractal patterns. In the drawing, these are rendered with the finest white pencil, a stippling of light that creates a sense of fragility and cold. The telescope is a frozen eye, its lenses blinded by the condensation of the night. The commander looks at the instrument, thinking about the stars it was meant to observe. He wonders if the stars are still there, behind the thick charcoal gray clouds. He imagines the constellations, the Great Bear, the Hunter, the Dragon, moving in their slow, eternal orbits across the frozen sky. They are the only things that possess more patience than he does. They are the ultimate strategists, watching the rise and fall of empires with an indifference that he can only aspire to. He turns his gaze back to the candle, preferring the immediate, humble light to the cold, distant brilliance of the stars. The texture of the air in the tent has become almost liquid. It feels as though he is sitting at the bottom of a deep, frozen pool, the weight of the atmosphere pressing down on him with a silent, crushing force. This sensation is captured in the vintage style of the drawing through the use of heavy, horizontal shading in the background, which creates a sense of atmospheric density. The commander is a part of this density, his form defined more by what is missing from the shadows than by the light itself. He is a study in negative space, a figure of charcoal and slate who exists only because the light of the candle has granted him a temporary reprieve from the void. Every movement he makes, the slight tilt of his head, the slow blink of his eyes, feels as though it is occurring through a medium thicker than air. It is a world of slow motion, where the passage of time is measured in the slow drift of dust motes through the golden light. He looks at the quill pen again. The ink on the nib has dried into a dark, crusty shell, its surface reflecting the candle flame like a piece of obsidian. He picks up the pen, feeling its lightness in his gloved hand. It feels like a feather from a ghost, a tool that no longer has any purchase on the physical world. He thinks about the letters he should be writing, reports to the high command, letters to the families of the fallen, orders for the spring offensive. But the words are as frozen as the ink. They are trapped in a state of potential, unable to find their way onto the paper. He realizes that the strategy of the candlelight is not about communication, but about silence. It is about the thoughts that are never written down, the decisions that are made in the stillness of the night and then forgotten in the chaos of the day. He sets the pen back down, the sound of the wood on the desk a soft, final clack. The smell of the candle is now so pervasive that it has become the scent of his own thoughts. It is a heavy, waxy smell, the smell of time being consumed. He watches the flame as it reaches the edge of the candle holder. The wax pool is now deep and turbulent, the heat of the flame causing tiny currents to form in the liquid. He sees a small piece of charred wick drifting in the pool, a dark island in a golden sea. This island is the only thing moving in the room, a tiny, aimless survivor of the fire. The commander watches the drift of the wick, finding a strange, hypnotic comfort in its randomness. It is a reminder that even in a world of absolute order and strategy, there is room for the small, the accidental, and the drifting. The visual style of the scene is a masterpiece of environmental storytelling. The vintage colored pencil has been used to create a surface that looks rough and weathered, with the grain of the paper providing a sense of grit and reality. The colors are muted and deep, Prussian blue, charcoal gray, burnt umber, and the single, vibrant note of amber yellow. There are no sharp transitions here, no bright colors to distract the eye. Everything is blended and smudged, a visual representation of a world that is slowly losing its definition. The commander is the only thing that remains sharp, his lines drawn with a heavy, purposeful hand. He is the focus of the composition, the one element that refuses to be smudged away by the dark. His thoughts drift to the history of the camp, the thousands of men who are currently sleeping in their rows of white tents. He imagines them as a vast, silent forest, their breath a mist that hangs over the valley. He feels a sense of profound loneliness, being the only one awake in this landscape of ice. It is the loneliness of command, the weight of being the consciousness of the army. He is the one who must remain awake so that the others can dream. He is the one who must watch the candle so that the others can ignore the dark. This is his duty, a burden that is as heavy as the wool and as cold as the frost. He accepts the loneliness without resentment, for it is the source of his authority. To lead is to be alone. To command is to sit in a tent and watch the light. The wind outside begins a new melody, a high-pitched, whistling sound that seems to be coming from the very peak of the tent. It is a thin, piercing note, like the sound of a distant flute. The commander listens to the flute of the wind, hearing in it the voice of the high atmosphere, the voice of the places where the air is too thin for men to breathe. It is a cold, indifferent music, a song of the void. He acknowledges the music with a slight, rhythmic movement of his gloved fingers against the map. He is playing along with the wind, a silent accompaniment to the music of the winter. He is a part of the symphony of the freeze, a single, low-frequency note in the vast, orchestral silence of the night. The visual texture of the map is now one of extreme detail. In the dying light of the candle, every fiber of the parchment is visible, every drop of dried ink a miniature mountain. He sees the way the paper has absorbed the moisture of the night, its surface becoming soft and slightly translucent. He thinks about the fragility of the information recorded on the map. A single spill of water, a single spark from the candle, and the entire world would be erased. The history of the campaign, the geography of the territory, the plans for the future, all of it is held in this fragile, temporary medium. He feels a sense of protectiveness toward the map, a need to ensure its survival through the night. It is the only thing that proves that the world still exists. He looks at the clock on the desk. He has turned it face down, but the tick-tick-tick of the mechanism is still audible, a dry, metallic heartbeat in the silence. The sound is now a part of the background, like the hum of the wind or the groaning of the wood. He no longer resents the clock. He recognizes it as a fellow traveler in the night, a small, mechanical soul that is also trying to endure. He wonders how many more ticks are left in the mechanism before the spring is spent. He wonders how many more breaths are left in his own chest before the cold reaches the center. The measurement of time is no longer a matter of hours or minutes, but a matter of endurance. How long can the metal tick? How long can the heart beat? How long can the candle burn? The texture of the wool coat against his chin has become a solid, unchanging presence. It is a rough, coarse fabric that smells of sheep and smoke. He feels the weight of the coat on his shoulders, a physical representation of the weight of his responsibility. The coat is his fortress, his last line of defense against the void. He pulls the collar tighter, the movement creating a soft, rustling sound that is the only communication he has with the world. He is a man in a coat, in a tent, in a valley, in a winter. The scale of his world is small, but its significance is absolute. He is the pivot point of the universe, the one who stays awake to ensure that the world does not disappear in the dark. The light of the second candle begins to flicker more violently now, the flame reaching the very bottom of the wick. The pool of melted wax is being consumed, the fire dipping low to find the last traces of fuel. The shadows in the tent respond with a frantic, jagged dance, leaping across the walls and the ceiling. The commander does not move. He is prepared for the transition. He has the third candle ready, a white, unlit pillar that sits on the corner of the desk like a silent promise. He watches the dying flame, seeing in it the end of another hour of the night. The strategy continues. The history remains boring and heavy. The winter remains cold and absolute. The visual style of the drawing captures this moment of transition with a series of quick, energetic strokes of the charcoal. The shadows are no longer static. They are full of movement and life, a dark chaos that threatens to overwhelm the center of the image. The light is a small, desperate point of amber, a tiny star that is about to go out. The commander is a figure of absolute stability in this chaos, his lines firm and unchanging. He is the anchor of the composition, the one who will bring order to the darkness. He reaches for the matchbox, his gloved hand moving with the slow, deliberate grace of a man who knows that time is on his side. The matchbox is cold and dry, its wooden surface rough against his fingers. He picks it up, feeling the weight of the matches inside. Each match is a potential sun, a small piece of light that can hold back the dark for a few moments. He considers the act of striking the match, the friction, the spark, the flare of sulfur and fire. It is a primitive, powerful act, a reassertion of human will over the indifference of the elements. He waits for the exact moment of the candle's death, the interval of absolute shadow that will signal the start of the next phase of the vigil. He is the master of the light, the strategist of the candlelight. The flame of the second candle gives a final, brilliant flare, illuminating the entire tent for a fraction of a second. He sees the frost on the walls, the texture of the map, the dust on the floorboards, all of it rendered in a sharp, vibrant amber. Then, with a soft, final hiss, the light goes out. The smoke rises in a thin, gray spiral, a ghost of the fire that has just departed. The darkness is absolute. The indigo night has claimed the center of the tent. The commander sits in the dark, a silent figure of charcoal and wool, feeling the cold pressing in on all sides. He does not hurry. He enjoys the darkness, the purity of the void. He breathes in the scent of the dying wick, the smell of time that has been successfully negotiated. Then with a steady hand he strikes the match. The sound scritch is a sharp, dry violation of the silence. The flare of light is a sudden, violent birth, an orange and white sun that pushes back the indigo shadows. He brings the match to the wick of the third candle, watching as the fire catches and begins to grow. The room settles back into its familiar chiaroscuro. The new light is clean and bright, the tallow white and unscarred. The shadows retreat to their corners, resuming their patient vigil. The commander breathes a long, slow sigh of relief, his breath forming a fresh cloud of white vapor. The continuity has been preserved. The vigil remains unbroken. The strategy by candlelight continues into its next phase, a new hour of endurance defined by the height of this fresh pillar of wax. The night is long and the winter is deep, but the commander is still here. He is still seated. He is still watching. He is the history of the cold, told in the slow, monotone language of the breath and the flame. The strategy remains the same: endure. And he will endure until the light fails or the dawn arrives to claim the world. The third candle stands with a stoic, unblemished grace, its ivory surface a stark, vertical contrast to the dark, horizontal planes of the field desk. It represents the beginning of the night's deepest watch, that hollow interval where the world feels as though it has been permanently abandoned by the sun. The flame is fresh and vigorous, a slender, tapering needle of fire that burns with a clean, white-hot intensity at its core, fading into a rich, translucent gold at its edges. In the visual language of the vintage drawing, this light is rendered with a heavy application of soft pastel, the pigment layered until it possesses a tangible, velvety depth. It casts a brilliant, circular halo onto the parchment of the map, a pool of clarity that feels like a sanctuary amidst the encroaching tide of charcoal and indigo shadows. The commander watches as the first melt begins, a microscopic bead of liquid wax forming at the base of the wick, shimmering like a trapped diamond before it overflows the rim and begins its slow, tectonic crawl down the side of the candle. This movement is the only sign of life in the room, a silent, hydraulic process that marks the passage of seconds in a night that has long since transcended the measurement of hours. The stillness within the tent has reached a state of crystalline perfection. It is no longer an absence of sound, but a solid, atmospheric pressure that seems to vibrate with the frequency of the ice itself. Within this silence, the most minute physical changes take on a monumental significance. The commander hears the sound of the frost growing, a faint, microscopic clicking as the water molecules in the air align themselves into geometric lattices upon the surface of the tent poles. He hears the fibers of the heavy wool rug beneath his boots as they stiffen and contract, the lanolin in the wool becoming a brittle, waxy solid. These sounds are the heartbeat of the freeze, a slow, repetitive rhythm that suggests the world is being turned into a mineral monument of itself. The visual style of the scene captures this transformation through the use of sharp, white-colored pencil strokes, rendered over the deep, smudged blues of the background to suggest the fine, needle-like structures of the rime ice. Every surface, the brass of the telescope, the glass of the inkwell, the rough grain of the wood, is being claimed by this delicate, frozen filigree. The commander's posture has become as fixed and unchanging as the furniture. He is no longer merely a man sitting in a chair. He has become a component of the composition, a figure drawn in heavy, definitive lines of charcoal and burnt umber. The weight of his greatcoat is a constant, downward force, a heavy mantle of wool that feels as though it has been cast from lead. He can feel the texture of the fabric against his skin, the coarse, itchy grain of the weave, the stiffness of the seams where the moisture has frozen into rigid lines. He does not move to adjust the fit. He has surrendered to the geometry of the chair, his spine a vertical axis that parallels the center pole of the tent. This immobility is his greatest strategic asset. By refusing to move, he refuses to acknowledge the cold's victory over the body. He remains a conscious point of heat in a landscape of absolute zero, a sentinel of the spirit in a world that has succumbed to the hibernation of the flesh. On the desk, the map is a landscape of profound, static drama. In the light of the third candle, the textures of the parchment are revealed with a clarity that feels almost intrusive. The commander traces the path of a supply route that has been rendered in the drawing as a series of fine, cross-hatched lines. He imagines the reality of that road, the frozen mud ruts, the abandoned wagons buried in white, the silence of the teamsters as they huddle around dying embers. This is the boring, heavy reality of the campaign, the logistics of survival. He thinks about the sacks of grain, the barrels of salt pork, the cases of lamp oil. These are the pieces of the puzzle he must solve, yet in this light, they are merely symbols, marks of ink on a sheet of dead skin. The strategy by Candlelight is to maintain the belief that these symbols still represent a world that can be moved and managed. He is the keeper of the abstraction, the one who preserves the idea of an army even when the army itself is buried under 6 feet of snow. The visual atmosphere of the tent is a study in the endurance of color. The deep, Prussian blues and slate grays of the shadows are not flat. They are layered with hints of violet and emerald, creating a sense of infinite, cold depth. The warm amber of the candlelight is the only defiance against this cool palette, a single, glowing coal in a universe of ice. The artist has used the dark surface of the paper to anchor the scene, allowing the texture of the material to show through the lighter applications of pencil and pastel. This creates a grainy, vintage aesthetic that suggests a memory being preserved in a dusty archive. It is a story told in the language of light and shadow, where the silence is as important as the subject. The commander is the focus of this study. his form a masterclass in tonal control, the highlights of the candle light catching the silver of his hair and the weathered ridges of his face. The smell of the tent has become a thick, unchanging substance. It is a mixture of the fatty, clean scent of the new candle, the dry, metallic tang of the frost, and the faint, earthy aroma of the old paper. It is a smell that suggests permanence, a scent that has been baked into the air by the constant presence of the flame. The commander inhales this mixture, feeling it coat the back of his throat like a fine dust. There is no freshness here, no intrusion of the outside world. The air is stagnant, a recycled atmosphere that has been breathed 1,000 times. He finds a certain peace in this stagnation. It is a closed system, a world where the variables are known and the surprises are few. He is the master of this small, airless kingdom, the one who dictates the rhythm of the breath and the pulse of the light. Outside, the wind has entered a state of sustained, low-frequency vibration. It is no longer a sound that can be heard so much as it is a sensation that can be felt in the bone. It is the sound of the valley breathing, a long, slow intake and exhale of frozen air. The tent reacts to this vibration with a series of rhythmic, melodic groans. The wood of the poles, the hemp of the ropes, the heavy canvas of the walls all speaking in a chorus of structural endurance. The commander listens to this music, his mind following the rise and fall of the pressure. He can hear the subtle changes in the wind's pitch as it interacts with the different parts of the camp, the high-pitched whistle as it passes over the vent of his tent, the low-pitched thrumming as it hits the side of a supply wagon, the sharp, percussive snap as it catches a loose piece of fabric. He is a conductor of this silent orchestra, the one who understands the score of the winter. The rime ice on the telescope has reached a level of complexity that is almost organic. The crystals have branched and merged into a solid shell of white, the instrument now looking like something that has been pulled from the depths of a frozen ocean. The commander looks at the telescope, thinking about the concept of vision. In the dark, vision is an act of imagination. He does not need the lenses to see the camp, the mountains, or the enemy. He sees them in the map, in the shadows, and in the patterns of the frost. He sees the future as a series of inevitable movements, a slow-motion advance that will only begin when the ice finally yields. The telescope is a reminder of a different kind of sight, a sight that relies on light and distance. Here, in the tent, the only sight that matters is the inward gaze, the constant monitoring of the self's resolve. The visual style of the drawing captures this inward focus through its composition. The lines of the desk, the chair, and the commander all point toward the center of the flame, creating a sense of centripetal force. The shadows in the corners are not just backgrounds. They are active participants in the drama, their dark, grainy textures pushing the viewer's eye back toward the light. The vintage aesthetic is reinforced by the softness of the transitions, the way the amber glow of the candle bleeds into the indigo of the night. It is a drawing that invites contemplation, a visual representation of a mind that has slowed to the pace of the freeze. Every detail, the fraying edge of a map, the glint of a brass button, the soft smudge of a thumbprint on the paper, is a testament to the slow, heavy passage of time. His thoughts drift to the history of the soldiers under his command. He thinks about the boring, repetitive tasks that define their lives, the cleaning of the muskets, the mending of the boots, the counting of the rations. These are the true markers of a soldier's worth, the ability to maintain the routine in the face of the extraordinary. He feels a deep, quiet affection for these men, for their silent endurance and their uncomplaining acceptance of the cold. They are like the trees in the forest, standing still and waiting for the season to change. He is the one who must ensure that they remain standing, the one who provides the structure and the purpose for their waiting. The strategy by Candlelight is his way of honoring their patience. By remaining awake and vigilant, he validates their sleep. By studying the map, he validates their stillness. He is the memory of the army, the one who holds the narrative of the campaign in his hands. The texture of the air in the tent has become almost granular. It feels as though the darkness is composed of fine, airborne silt that is settling over everything in the room. This is reflected in the grainy texture of the pastel drawing, where the colors are built up from millions of tiny, vibrant dots. The commander feels this silt in his throat, a dry, dusty sensation that makes every breath a labor. He imagines the air as a fine powder, a pulverized version of the landscape outside, filling the tent and coating everything in a layer of gray. This powder is the medium of his thoughts, the substance through which he must navigate his strategy. Everything is heavy, everything is slow, everything is cold. He feels the weight of his own eyelids, the effort required to keep them open. He does not want to sleep, he wants to witness. He wants to be the one who sees the night through to its end. The candle gutters slightly, the flame dancing in a draft that has found its way through a minute gap in the floorboards. The shadows on the wall react with a sudden, frantic motion, jumping and swirling like ink dropped into water. The commander does not move. He trusts the candle to recover. He trusts the tent to hold. He waits for the equilibrium to return. When it does, the room feels even quieter than before, as if the brief disruption has deepened the silence. He looks at the pool of melted wax at the base of the flame. It is a clear, golden liquid, a small lake of potential light. He watches a tiny speck of soot drift into the lake, where it is slowly absorbed by the viscous fluid. It is a small, insignificant event, a footnote in the history of the night. The visual texture of the map is now one of extreme detail. In the light of the third candle, every fiber of the parchment is visible, every drop of dried ink a miniature mountain. He sees the way the paper has absorbed the moisture of the night, its surface becoming soft and slightly translucent. He thinks about the fragility of the information recorded on the map. A single spill of water, a single spark from the candle, and the entire world would be erased. The history of the campaign, the geography of the territory, the plans for the future, all of it is held in this fragile, temporary medium. He feels a sense of protectiveness toward the map, a need to ensure its survival through the night. It is the only thing that proves that the world still exists. He looks at the clock on the desk. He has turned it face down, but the tick-tick-tick of the mechanism is still audible, a dry, metallic heartbeat in the silence. The sound is now a part of the background, like the hum of the wind or the groaning of the wood. He no longer resents the clock. He recognizes it as a fellow traveler in the night, a small, mechanical soul that is also trying to endure. He wonders how many more ticks are left in the mechanism before the spring is spent. He wonders how many more breaths are left in his own chest before the cold reaches the center. The measurement of time is no longer a matter of hours or minutes, but a matter of endurance. How long can the metal tick? How long can the heart beat? How long can the candle burn? The texture of the wool coat against his chin has become a solid, unchanging presence. It is a rough, coarse fabric that smells of sheep and smoke. He feels the weight of the coat on his shoulders, a physical representation of the weight of his responsibility. The coat is his fortress, his last line of defense against the void. He pulls the collar tighter, the movement creating a soft, rustling sound that is the only communication he has with the world. He is a man in a coat, in a tent, in a valley, in a winter. The scale of his world is small, but its significance is absolute. He is the pivot point of the universe, the one who stays awake to ensure that the world does not disappear in the dark. The light of the third candle is now at its most stable. The wick has been trimmed by the flame to a perfect length, and the pool of wax is consistent and deep. The glow it casts is steady and unwavering, a pillar of amber in the indigo night. The commander sits in this light, his eyes half closed, his mind drifting in the gray mists of fatigue. He is not sleeping, but he is no longer fully awake. He is in that liminal state between the two, a place where thoughts become images and images become sensations. He sees the map as a physical landscape, the parchment turning into snow and ice. He sees the shadows as living entities, the darkness turning into fur and shadow. He is a part of the drawing, a figure of pastel and charcoal that is being slowly overworked by the artist. The visual style of the scene is now fully realized in its vintage, hand-drawn aesthetic. The use of colored pencils to create the fine details of the map and the texture of the wool gives the image a sense of tactile reality, while the soft pastels of the background provide a dreamlike, hypnotic atmosphere. The color palette is strictly limited to shades of indigo, charcoal, slate, and the warm amber of the candle. There are no bright colors here, no distractions for the eye. The focus is entirely on the interplay of light and shadow, on the struggle of the flame to maintain its presence in the ocean of dark. The drawing feels like a relic from another age, a piece of forgotten history that has been preserved in a dusty portfolio. It is a story that has no beginning and no end, only a middle that is defined by the endurance of the cold. The commander's shadow on the wall has become more stable as the candle flame has settled. It is now a dark, sharp silhouette, a mirror image of his own immobility. He looks at the shadow, seeing in it the archetype of the leader, the man who stands alone against the dark. He wonders if the shadow feels the cold, if it experiences the same numbness and fatigue that he does. Or perhaps the shadow is the true self, the part of him that is immune to the elements, the part that will remain long after the flesh has failed. He finds comfort in the idea of the shadow self, a silent, indestructible guardian that will continue the strategy even after the candle has gone out. The smell of the tent is now punctuated by the scent of old paper and dry ink, a dusty, archival aroma that suggests the weight of history. He thinks of all the reports he has read, all the accounts of previous winters and previous wars. They are all here in the tent, part of the atmosphere he breathes. He is not just a man in a tent. He is a part of a long, unbroken chain of command that stretches back into the mists of time. This sense of continuity is what sustains him. He is not alone. He is supported by the ghosts of all those who came before him, all those who sat at desks in the dark and waited for the dawn. The strategy by candlelight is their legacy, and he is its current steward. The night is a long, slow process of sedimentation. He can feel the darkness settling over the camp, layer by layer, flake by flake. He can feel the silence building up, a monument of quiet that will eventually reach the stars. He accepts this process with a calm, stoic indifference. He is the one who witnesses the accumulation, the one who records the history of the stillness. He sits at his desk, a figure of charcoal and wool, watching the light. The strategy is simple: endure. The history is boring. It is the history of the freeze. And the story is long, told in the slow, hypnotic rhythm of the breath and the flame. He reaches for a small piece of charcoal that lies on the edge of the desk. His gloved fingers are clumsy, the leather thick and unresponsive. He picks up the charcoal and holds it over a blank corner of the map. He does not draw. He simply feels the weight of the carbon, the potential for marking the world. The charcoal is a piece of wood that has been transformed by fire, a solid remains of a previous life. He sets the charcoal back down, a small black mark appearing on the parchment where it touched. It is the only thing he has accomplished in the last hour, and it is enough. He is still here. The candle is still burning. The night is still cold. The vigil continues into the final watch, into the threshold of the dawn. The third candle has reached its final, humble extremity. The ivory pillar, now a mere disk of translucent wax submerged within the brass socket of the holder. The flame has lost its needle-like precision, expanding instead into a soft, rounded dome of orange light that pulses with a slow, heavy rhythm. In the visual narrative of this vintage drawing, the light is no longer a conquering force. It is a retreating survivor, its glow barely reaching the edges of the map. The shadows, rendered in the deepest possible layers of charcoal and indigo pastel, have become absolute. They have filled the corners of the tent and the peaks of the canvas until the room feels like a cave carved from the very heart of the winter. The commander remains seated, his form a study in profound, unmoving shadows. The light catches only the very edge of his collar and the curve of his forehead, leaving the rest of his face to the dark. His breath, the only clock remaining in this airless void, is a thick, rhythmic cloud of white vapor that rises from his lips, lingers in the amber glow, and then vanishes into the Prussian blue darkness above. It is a slow, hydraulic cycle of life, a measured release of heat into a world that has reached the point of absolute zero. The silence of the pre-dawn hour is a physical weight, a density that seems to press the very thoughts back into the mind. It is a silence that has been refined by the preceding hours of the freeze, stripped of every unnecessary vibration until only the fundamental tone of the earth remains. Within this stillness, the commander hears the sound of the world's final contraction. He hears the microscopic groan of the wood in the desk as the last remnants of moisture are turned to ice. He hears the sound of the canvas as it stiffens, the fabric becoming as rigid and brittle as a sheet of metal. He hears the sound of his own pulse, a slow, muffled drumming that feels distant, as if it belongs to someone else. These sounds are not disruptions. They are the textures of the stillness, the individual grains of the charcoal drawing that give the darkness its depth and its reality. The visual style of the scene captures this atmospheric weight through the use of heavy, horizontal shading. The pastel applied so thickly that the texture of the dark paper is almost entirely obscured. The cold has now reached the innermost sanctuary of his being. It is no longer an external force to be resisted, but an internal presence to be accommodated. He feels the cold in the center of his bones, a dry, hollow ache that has replaced the sensation of blood. His hands, still resting on the map, have become indistinguishable from the parchment. In the dimming light, the leather of his gloves appears as a dark, mineral formation, its surface covered in a fine, crystalline rime. He looks at the map, seeing the mountains and rivers through a haze of fatigue and shadow. They are no longer places to be conquered or defended. They are merely patterns of ink, frozen records of a world that has ceased to move. The strategy by Candlelight has reached its ultimate conclusion, the strategy of absolute stasis. He has successfully navigated the night by becoming as immovable as the landscape itself. He is a part of the winter, a figure of charcoal and wool who has survived by surrendering to the freeze. The visual atmosphere of the tent is undergoing a subtle, almost imperceptible transformation. The deep, saturated indigos of the night are beginning to shift toward a pale, monochromatic slate. This is the arrival of the false dawn, the moment where the dark begins to lose its density without yet becoming light. In the vintage style of the drawing, this transition is rendered by the artist using a light, gray-blue pastel, applied with a soft touch over the charcoal base. It creates a ghostly, ethereal quality to the air, as if the room is filling with a fine, frozen mist. The commander watches as the objects in the room, the telescope, the chest, the water basin, begin to regain their silhouettes. They do not appear as they did in the candlelight. They are now flat, gray shapes, stripped of their warmth and their detail. They are the skeletons of the night, revealed by the cold, indifferent clarity of the morning. He looks at the candle one last time. The flame gives a final, weary flicker, the blue base of the fire expanding to consume the last drop of liquid tallow. It is a quiet, dignified end, a final surrender to the law of the vigil. For a few seconds, the wick continues to glow a dull, ember red, a tiny point of heat in the gray gloom. Then the red fades to black, and a thin, spiraling thread of gray smoke rises from the socket. The smell of the extinguished wick, the scent of burnt cord and warm wax, is the final olfactory record of the night. It is a scent that signifies completion. The duty of the light has been fulfilled. The third candle is gone, and the darkness is no longer a threat because the day, however cold and gray, has arrived to claim the vigil. The commander breathes in the scent, feeling a sense of profound, quiet accomplishment. He has held the line. He has maintained the consciousness of the camp. He has outlasted the dark. The camp outside is beginning to stir, though the sounds are so muffled by the snow that they feel like echoes from another world. He hears the distant, metallic clank of a shovel hitting a frozen stone. He hears the low, rhythmic crunch of a sentry's boots on the packed drifts. He hears the faint, brittle sound of a bugle call, the notes thin and wavering in the sub-zero air. These are the sounds of the machine of the army restarting, the gears grinding slowly as the heat of the morning, however minimal, reaches the men. The commander does not move to join them. He remains in his chair, his hands on the map, his gaze fixed on the place where the flame used to be. He is the bridge between the night and the day, and his transition is not yet complete. He must wait for the light to become strong enough to reveal the lines on the parchment, to turn the ink back into geography. The visual texture of the map is now a study in gray. The ivory of the paper has become a pale, flat slate, and the black of the ink has become a deep, muted charcoal. The ridges and valleys he traced during the night are now visible as subtle variations in the shading of the paper. He looks at the uncharted region, the blank space that had fascinated him in the hours of the deep dark. In the morning light, it is still blank, still a void of potential. He realizes that the strategy is not to fill that blank space, but to respect it. The winter has taught him that there are places where the human will cannot go, where the only possible action is to witness and to wait. The map is not a blueprint for conquest. It is a record of the boundaries of the possible. He feels a deep, quiet reverence for the blank spaces, for the parts of the world that remain wild and unreachable. The cold in the tent has changed its quality. It is no longer the predatory, seeking cold of the night, but the heavy, stagnant cold of the morning. It feels less like a threat and more like a permanent condition. He looks at the rime ice on the tent walls, seeing the intricate dendritic patterns in the flat, gray light. They look like the drawings of an ancient, forgotten civilization, a complex language of frost that he will never fully understand. The vintage style of the drawing captures this by using fine, silver-blue lines, creating a sense of crystalline permanence. The ice is the true history of the night, the only physical record of the hours he has spent in the dark. He considers the ice, seeing in it the beauty of the absolute. It is a world of pure form, a world where the messiness of life has been frozen into a state of perfect order. His body feels heavy, a leaden weight that is anchored to the wooden chair. He considers the act of standing up, of moving toward the tent entry and stepping out into the white world of the camp. The thought feels like a monumental task, a physical exertion that would require more energy than he possesses. He chooses instead to remain still for a few moments longer, to savor the finality of the vigil. The strategy by candlelight is over, but the state of mind it created remains. He is still the watcher, still the guardian of the silence. He looks at the quill pen, the ink on the nib a dark, crusty shell. He picks up the pen, feeling its lightness in his gloved hand. He does not dip it into the inkwell. He simply holds it, a tool of potentiality. He is ready to write the history of the day once the sun has risen high enough to thaw the ink. The smell of the tent is now dominated by the scent of the frozen earth and the cold canvas. The scent of the wax has faded, becoming a part of the memory of the night. The air is dry and sterile, the scent of an environment that has been cleansed by the frost. He inhales deeply, the cold air filling his lungs and clearing the last mists of fatigue from his mind. He is awake. He is conscious. He is alive. This is the victory of the night, not that the winter has been defeated, but that he has remained present in the face of it. He is the heart of the campaign, the steady, rhythmic pulse that ensures the continuity of the mission. The strategy of endurance has been successful, and the army remains intact because the commander did not blink. The visual composition of the room is now fully revealed in the slate-gray light of the dawn. The heavy mass of the desk, the vertical pillar of the tent pole, the dark mound of the sleeping cot, they are all part of a single, unified landscape of stasis. The vintage style, with its rough textures and muted tones, gives the scene a sense of timelessness. It is a world that has always existed and will always exist, a frozen moment in the long history of the winter. The commander is the central figure in this world, a man who has become a part of the drawing, his lines merging with the shadows and the light. Every detail of his form, the texture of the wool, the grain of the leather, the silver of his hair, is a testament to the artist's commitment to the study of stillness. Outside, the light is growing stronger, the gray of the sky turning toward a pale, opalescent white. The shadows in the tent are retreating, shrinking back into the corners and beneath the furniture. The circle of the desk is no longer a sanctuary of light. It is merely a part of the room. He looks at the silver flask in the corner, its surface now reflecting the flat, gray light of the morning. It no longer glints with the fire of the candle. It is a dull, cold cylinder of metal, a relic of a night that is now over. He reaches out and touches the flask, his gloved fingers feeling the biting cold of the silver. He does not drink. He simply acknowledges the object's presence. It is a part of the inventory of his survival, a piece of the history of the vigil. His thoughts drift to the concept of the next night. He knows that the sun will offer no warmth, only a brief interval of visibility before the indigo darkness returns. He knows that he will have to light the candles again, to study the map again, to listen to the wind again. The strategy of endurance is not a one-time event. It is a repetitive cycle, a continuous engagement with the elements. He accepts this with a calm, stoic resignation. This is the nature of his command. This is the history of the campaign. He is the one who watches the light so that others may inhabit the dark. He is the one who maintains the order so that others may survive the chaos. He is the commander, and the winter is his domain. The texture of the air seems to have thinned slightly as the light has increased. It no longer feels like a liquid weight, but like a cold, dry gas. He can feel the movement of the air against his skin, a faint draft that suggests the atmosphere is beginning to move again. The wind outside has died down, leaving a silence that is even more profound than the silence of the night. It is the silence of the aftermath, the silence of a world that has been scoured by the gale and then left to freeze. He listens to this new silence, finding it more challenging than the noise of the storm. The wind provided a rhythm, a voice to be heard. This morning's silence is a void, a blank space that he must fill with his own purpose. He adjusts his position in the chair, the wood creaking in protest. The sound is a declaration of his presence, a signature on the page of the morning. The visual style of the drawing captures this final moment with a series of soft, blended strokes. The sharp contrasts of the night have been replaced by a delicate, nuanced palette of grays and blues. The image feels soft, almost out of focus, as if the world is still trying to define itself in the new light. The commander is the only thing that remains sharp, his lines firm and purposeful. He is the anchor of the composition, the one who brings definition to the gray void. The drawing is a masterpiece of the vintage aesthetic, a record of a human soul that has navigated the depths of the winter and emerged intact. It is a story told in the language of shadows, and its conclusion is not an ending, but a continuation. He looks at the clock on the desk. He turns it face up, seeing the black hands against the white face. The tick-tick-tick of the mechanism is now a sharp, clear sound, a mechanical pulse that marks the beginning of the day's work. He notes the time, 6 o'clock. The night has lasted 12 hours and the candle has burned for every one of them. He feels a sense of satisfaction in the measurement of the time. It is a record of his success, a numerical proof of his endurance. He sets the clock back down, its face now visible to anyone who might enter the tent. He is no longer in the time of the candle. He is back in the time of the world. He is ready for the morning. He reaches for the heavy brass bell that sits on the corner of the desk. It is cold and heavy, its surface covered in a fine layer of dust. He picks it up, the movement slow and deliberate. He does not ring it yet. He simply holds it, feeling the weight of the metal and the potential for sound. This bell will signal the beginning of the morning briefing, the moment when the strategy by candlelight becomes the strategy of the day. He considers the reports he will hear, the decisions he will make, the orders he will give. They are the boring, repetitive tasks of command, the essential work of keeping the army alive. He is ready for the work. He is the commander, and he has survived the night. The final visual image of the drawing is one of profound, quiet dignity. The commander sits at his desk, his hands on the map, his gaze looking toward the tent entry. The light of the morning filters through the canvas, a pale, gray-white glow that illuminates the room without warming it. The shadows are soft and long, stretching toward the peak of the tent. The candle is a dead stub, the smoke long since vanished. The room is a study in gray and blue, a landscape of frozen order and silent endurance. The vintage style, with its grainy texture and soft colors, gives the image a sense of permanence and peace. It is the end of the night and the beginning of the day. The strategy continues. The history continues. The winter continues. He takes one final, long breath, feeling the cold air expand in his chest. He feels the strength in his limbs, the clarity in his mind, the resolve in his heart. He is the still point in a turning world, the axis upon which the history of the valley rotates. He has outlasted the darkness, and he will outlast the light. He is the master of the freeze, the strategist of the candlelight, the witness to the winter. He sets the bell back down on the desk, the sound of the metal on the wood a soft, final clack. He is ready. The drawing fades now, the colors blending into the gray of the paper, the lines becoming soft and indistinct. The texture of the wool, the grain of the wood, the glint of the brass, they all disappear into the haze of the morning. The only thing that remains is the feeling of the cold and the sound of the breath. The story is complete, yet it remains unfinished, a continuous loop of endurance and quiet suffering. The night will return and the commander will be there, waiting with his candle and his map. Until then, there is only the gray light and the long, slow history of the freeze.